The Ice Age is coming. While everyone is struggling to survive, our MC is making the frozen frontiers his very own kingdom with his mysterious powers. In the middle of an unrecognizable frozen city where every infrastructure has been completely shut down, every mode of transportation at a standstill, an urgent report is coming in that the Earth has finally entered a new ice age at a rapid pace. The brave correspondent braced the cold as hard as he could, his microphone freezing over with every passing second, as he informed everyone that global temperatures would continue to drop even more with no signs of stopping. But he urges the public not to give up hope. Balling his fist, he projected confidence that the government had not forgotten about its citizens in these tough times. That as long as they stand together, the people of this strong nation will overcome this daunting crisis. Just as he was about to spiel more unity propaganda to quell the masses, a whole-ass frozen airplane made a crash landing in the middle of the city, plowing through the reporter and his whole crew. A man watched this final shot of the last news broadcast covered by the remaining TV station in the country. He watched it on a miserably frozen screen. After that plane crash landed on top of the remaining news network team, the TV finally cut into static. No more overcast news coverage of what's happening outside. The room of our protagonist, Han Feng, painted a picture of someone who tried to fight, but finally gave up. He did not even bother cleaning up the mess of what little supplies he had left. The area around his entrance is filled with boxes of useless stuff and dwindling provisions. Outside, someone had been knocking quite hard and calling his name in a panic. Finally hearing the incessant calling of his name, Han Feng stood up from his filthy, frozen apartment, took a steel bat modified with some nails, traces of blood still visible on its surface, and walked towards the door. Han Feng was gaunt. He had the combination of the thickest possible winter wear, but it was not enough to stave off the cold. He slowly and carefully peeked at the peephole to see who was on the other side of the door. Who he saw shocked him. It also excited him a little bit. It was a woman he was very familiar with before the Ice Age even kicked in. She also had her thickest winter wear on, but standing outside, exposed to the elements, made her face red and her body shiver uncontrollably. Han Feng opened the door with a slight flush on his face. The woman's name is Hyona, and he has no idea what she is doing outside of his door. Still holding the bat, he urged her to come inside where it was warmer and safer. These days, the outside world has turned into a dangerous, lawless land. Hyona swung the door open wider to enter Han Feng's relatively safer room. The next thing you know, she was already grabbing him by the collar and pushing her lips onto his. Her little bonnet even fell with how fast she moved. Han Feng was surprised, but he did not pull back, and his cheeks got even redder. This deep and passionate kiss went on for way too long, if you ask me. But let our boy get some of that sloppy kiss action in the middle of an abandoned hallway outside his home. When they separated, both Han Feng and Hyona were breathing heavily, their tongues still out, spit still dribbling. The world is ending, and this is what they're doing? Totally understandable. Realizing what just happened, Han Feng pulled back and asked what had gotten into this woman that she would just grab him and kiss him the second he opened the door. Still trying to catch her breath, she confessed that she had a realization that Han Feng was the man that she truly loved all this time. Tears were starting to form in the corner of her expressive eyes while telling him that he was the one she was supposed to be with all along. It takes a crisis to see someone's true colors, to see who really cares for you. Who will be there for you no matter how hard things get. Speaking of hard, Hyona wanted to prove that what she was saying was the truth by taking Han Feng's hands and putting them against her chest to feel how fast her heart was beating. She promised that she would be willing to do anything just so they could be together now. Hearing the word anything wiped out any semblance of rationality in our boy's brain. All the red flags turned green. To finally seal the deal, Hyona started pressing her thighs against Han Feng's flagpole while grinding and pulling him closer. He did not stand a chance at all. The world might be encased in ice and supplies might be low, but he was heating up like never before, and something was rising in the lower regions. Han Feng looked at Hyona directly in her eyes as she caressed his cheeks tenderly. He confessed that those words she just said meant the world to him. However, the doorframe is not the right place for them to continue this. Hyona gently shushed him so he would not say another word. All she wants right now is for Han Feng to close his eyes and feel the moment. Against his logical mind, Han Feng did what she asked. Now that his eyes were closed, he asked what was supposed to happen next. Well, that's when another guy comes in, gripping the door ominously. This mystery guy swung the frozen door wide open, locked onto Han Feng's head, and smashed a blunt weapon with killing intent. Poor Han Feng did not see it coming. His skull was crushed while his eyes were closed. It was a bloody and brutal mess. A cruel sneak attack splattered blood all over the apartment entrance. Hyona and the mystery man entered the apartment. She shivered and stuttered, seemingly shocked that her partner in crime would actually kill Han Feng. The man scoffed and told her to stop playing innocent, for she knew that this was the only way this encounter could go. The world went to hell a long time ago. One less mouth to feed is not going to change anything. Enough about dwelling on the brutal attack. It's time to see what this Han Feng chump has been hoarding. If they play their cards right, they might even get enough supplies to survive until rescue comes. The messed up part was that Han Feng did not die immediately. He lay down on the freezing cold ground, trembling in agony while all the blood that spilled from his head wound froze as soon as it got out. He was not really clear as to what happened, but he could not move. Maybe it has come. Perhaps he was finally dying. He can finally know what it feels like to lose his life. The last thing he saw was the mystery man and that evil witch, Hyona, flirting a few meters away from his limp body. He's been touching her in places he could only dream of as he promises to reward her for her best actress performance that made the whole operation possible. As Han Feng's eyes closed for good, the hatred he felt for that cold-hearted felt unbearably heavy. He swore that if there was a next life, he would never let himself be a lovesick puppy again. In the empty darkness that he was plunged into, Han Feng started seeing little droplets of light. It started from a little speck that started growing into something bigger and more substantial. As it got even brighter, Han Feng started questioning what the hell was happening. He subconsciously extended his arm. His skin was translucent, like it was an entirely different entity. The warm light attracted him after suffering through the endless cold of the real world. May this be the path to heaven, but the golden light suddenly changed its color to red. Now, what kind of heaven has this crimson color? After being baited by the golden light and trying to reach out for it, Han Feng, or at least an abstract construct of his body, felt his limbs getting shredded like he was being put through a meat grinder. Nothing goes well for this man. It did not take too long for the crimson light to cover his entire body as he let out a miserable scream of agony. His translucent frame disintegrates piece by piece. The dark nothingness was filled with his scattered essence, and Han Feng was gone. Still feeling the pain of getting ground and deconstructed atom by atom, he woke up in a cold sweat, screaming for his life. The pain was way too real. He was seduced into closing his eyes, bonked in the head for being too horny, died a depressing death, woke up in an empty void, got tricked into being torn from an atomic level, and now he doesn't know where he is. He looked around, and the sun shone bright through his balcony. His soft and comfortable bed was nice and clean. The air felt fresh as it lifted his curtains up. Han Feng was far from the cruel world he had gotten used to. It took him 30 minutes to absorb the wild things that had happened to him over the past few hours. He spent those 30 minutes reveling in the perfect view of the residential area overlooking his apartment. Han Feng could not get over the fact that the sun was shining again. He missed its warmth and its light. He thought that he would never feel this type of comfort and warmth ever again. He just checked the date, and it seems to be that it's the morning of June 28th. As far as he could remember, the Ice Age apocalypse will start on July 15th. He was supposed to die after being ambushed, but he was somehow brought back in time half a month before the end of civilization. In other words, he has been reborn and given the ultimate second chance. Aside from the memories he retained from the previous timeline, there is something different this time. Something strange was happening inside his body, and it might have manifested in his hands. Ever since he woke up, there's been a red glow wrapped around his right hand the whole time. He tried wiping it off, waving it away, but nothing made it disappear. It doesn't hurt. It just feels warm. It did not seem to do anything else aside from the light, and he thought that he was just imagining things at first. Han Feng must have stayed so long pondering what was happening on his balcony that he started sneezing. As he wiped his nose of the mess, he noticed that the red glow in his right hand had mysteriously turned to a green one. Then something happened that made him panic. The hand that was wrapped around by the green glow started getting bigger, growing in length as if his bones, flesh, and skin were stretching out. Anyone will freak out if they see their hands doing that. Afraid and confused, Han Feng stormed into his room and slammed the balcony door shut as fast as he could. He managed to make it inside before anything more drastic happened. He was huffing and puffing for air, but the hand seemed to have turned back to normal. The green glow was still there, though, lingering and seemingly inexhaustible. Han Feng looked at it helplessly. There were beams of light shooting out of his hand. How would modern science even justify or explain a mysterious phenomenon like this? After the lengthening incident outside, now it's shrinking very slowly. The green light seems to be an erratic thing. It shrinks and grows unpredictably, not like the stationary red one at all. But that's still a mystery too. Sitting down on his couch, Han Feng suddenly felt a pang of unbearable exhaustion. He hasn't done much aside from running back inside, but he feels drained. This might be connected to the green light. Frustrated, he started swinging his arms all over the place, trying to get a semblance of a clue as to what this really was. Then it hit him. Isn't this just like those manhwa stories that he loves to read? He immediately sprinted to the kitchen and grabbed his sharpest knife. In those manhwas that he loves, the protagonist always starts their stories by being reborn. Just like them, maybe he will gain cheat-like powers. He wanted to test this out by grabbing the coolest thing he could imagine and posing with it. After a few minutes of waiting for something to happen, anything to change, Han Feng just scratched his head in shame as the sharp knife did not react with the light in his hand at all. He was so busy trying to find out if he had some fantastic, cheat-like powers that he neglected his exhaustion and the rumbling of his stomach. He's just starving at this point. Unfortunately for him, the Han Feng of the past, who's clueless about the coming apocalypse, is a lazy bastard who does not even have a single piece of edible food in his fridge. This was getting bad. He had never felt so hungry before. If he does not eat something soon, he will most probably pass out at any second now. He turned his attention towards the living room, where a clear jar of soybean snacks was just sitting quietly. These roasted soybeans were just some leftover snacks he got before the apocalypse. It's not exactly a complete and filling meal, but it will have to do for now. It should tide the hunger before he hits up the supermarket later. He grabbed one of the roasted soybeans, unconsciously using his right hand, momentarily forgetting that it had the mysterious green light wrapped around it. Han Feng was too hungry to think of anything else. So, he tossed the soybean right into his mouth, hoping to get some type of food into his system. As soon as the bean hit his tongue, a smoky explosion occurred right in his face. The fog it created almost covered his entire upper body. Much to his surprise, he was now munching on a beanstalk. It looked as though the roasted soybean had sprouted inside his mouth. He could feel the roots on his tongue, and the stalk itself extended outward. He pulled it out, and the plant left an earthy taste in his mouth. Out of all the bizarre events he's been going through lately, this might be near the top. He was just about to snack on some roasted soybeans, and now this happens. Moreover, he does not feel tired anymore. It seems like that explosion on his face erased the hungry sensation he was feeling. Looking down at his right hand, the green light has vanished too. Maybe all of this has something to do with what happened to the soybean. He plucked one of the pods in the stalk and examined it carefully. Opening the luscious green pod, he confirmed that it was just an ordinary fresh bean sprout. Maybe this is the power that he was daydreaming about. No matter what, this is undoubtedly an incredible discovery that should be studied more. Still, he can't really research anything while worrying about dying of hunger at any moment. Right now, he has a bigger fish to fry in the form of stocking up on supplies before the end of the world, as everyone knows. For the first time in a long time, Han Feng could walk out of his apartment to feel the sun on his skin and hear the birds sing. He could walk amongst the bustling crowd of people in the commercial district, minding their own business instead of holing up in their homes, fearing the cold. Han Feng was in deep thought as he walked to his destination. Let's get this straight. First, the red glow around his hand has turned to green. The green light shrinks and grows his limbs, making his heart beat faster and super tired. When he touched the soybean snacks, it sprouted into a whole stalk. Looking at his right hand with more questions than answers, he wonders just what kind of power has been bestowed upon him by who knows who. He continued his contemplative walks casually until he heard a familiar, sweet voice calling his name that would have melted him before, but would make his blood boil now. Han Feng did not realize it right away, and turned around to see who was calling him by name. It was that evil witch that got him brutally killed, Lee Hyuna. She flashed her wide smile. Her makeup was on point, hiding her rotten personality. She asked if Han Feng was out shopping too. She even employed her expert witch tricks, appearing as pretty as humanly possible while commenting about how it's like fate that they ran into each other in this place. Han Feng hasn't really had the chance to digest everything that has happened yet. But seeing Lee Hyuna out in the wild is starting to bring back the bitterness he held onto until his final breath. Lee Hyuna used to be the goddess of his dreams for 3 long years. He was a simp that did everything in his power to make her happy. He did all that, knowing full well that he was nothing but just another fallback guy in the friend zone. No, he wasn't even in the friend zone. He was just a piggy bank. For all those years of devoting himself and his wallet to the wrong girl, he never would have thought that she would be the one that would get him killed. Before he could go out of control, Han Feng pinched himself to stay grounded and calm. It took every bit of his willpower to do so. Thinking rationally now is not the time to take his revenge. Not yet, at least. First, he needs to take care of the supply problem unless he wants to be miserable and hungry in the Ice Age again. Lee Hyuna walked closer and waved her hand around his eyes while asking what he was spacing out for. This has never happened before. It used to be that just hearing her voice would make the poor sap swoon. Han Feng swallowed his hatred for the witch and faked a smile as he apologized for being speechless and for how especially beautiful she looked today. She was just so radiant that he got a bit lost in the moment. Now that's more like it. Lee Hyuna coyly laughed and asked when he got so smooth with his lines like that. Her lips lifted to a slight and confident smirk, thinking that he got this boy eating at the palm of her hands. So, she went for the heart kill shot with the most adorable pose in her arsenal. Lee Hyuna invited Han Feng to go shopping together, but they had run into each other anyway. Now, there is a limit to how much time Han Feng could face her without losing control of his rage. So, he just walked on and apologized that they wouldn't be doing any shopping together today. Lee Hyuna was stunned. This was not how it was supposed to go down. She was supposed to get some free stuff from a pathetic simp. While walking in the other direction, Han Feng couldn't help but praise the girl's technique. But he won't fall for it. He won't be used as a personal ATM again. He's not that foolish anymore. So, he went straight to the spot where he could get everything he needed. Waldemar Shopping Plaza. This Waldemar in A-City is the most extensive and most well-stocked supermarket in the eastern region. It's like Walmart. But that brand's copyrighted. Of course, when the Ice Age hits, this place will be cleaned out overnight. Back in the previous timeline, nobody ever found out just who did it and how. Han Feng had already started his shopping spree and filled up one cart with goods. He needs to stock up as much as possible before society crumbles under the sheer cold. He consulted some internet forums about some generic apocalypse survival guide, and it was surprisingly helpful. Scrolling through, he listed down the things he'd need, like food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, tools, transportation, and even weapons. There's a lot to prepare, but he was so pumped to get some supplies that he forgot to take the more significant problem at hand. His personal wallet's current balance was a measly 15,000 yuan, equivalent to a little more than 2,000 USD. How was he supposed to secure a safe and comfortable life in the icy apocalypse with only this much? He's going to need a lot more cash for everything that he will need. At that moment, a message notification popped up on his phone. A notification that might be heaven's way of telling him to calm down. The message came from an organization called Money Jar Loans, congratulating him on his approved eligibility to take out a loan up to 168,000 yuan, or a little more than 23,000 USD. A light bulb dinged inside his mind. There was no need to panic when it came to funds. How could he forget that the convenience of technology had brought him an infinite money glitch? There are dozens of money lending apps that require minimal requirements to get a loan approved for those who are desperate for cash. They're incredibly predatory, but burying himself in debt doesn't matter, as he won't have to pay them back after the apocalypse goes into full swing. Out in the commercial district, some lady was angrily kicking an empty soda can on the curb. She's obviously upset about something. It turned out to be Lee Hyona. She looks like she is not in the best mood at all. Her eyes were full of toxic vitriol as today, one of her many simps dared to refuse to take her shopping when she got all dolled up to get spoiled. She was seriously pissed off that Han Feng would just take off like that without letting her deplete his bank account like a worthless leech. She started insulting the guy in her mind for being a pathetic loser who doesn't even own a car. Lee Hyona vowed never to be nice to that simp again. Her angry walk was interrupted by some loud honking coming from the car coming up on the road. Curious, she turned around to see what's up. It looked like a brand new truck straight out of the dealership. It was still shiny and premium looking. Han Feng was lowering the windows in the driver's seat. He just pulled up to greet Hyona as he just happened to pass her by while she was doing a walk of shame along the commercial district. Seeing the new wheels, Hyona's vow to never be nice to Han Feng again has seemingly melted out of her mind. All she saw were brand new leather seats and the smell of cash. Han Feng hopped off. When asked if the car was his, he answered affirmatively, adding that he just got it earlier. She came up to the witch and made up some story about how his dad has been killing it in the United States, business-wise, so he got some cash to blow. He even added that he just got out of the airport after dropping off his old man. Lee Hyona's face lit up. The only thing that could make that happen would be the possibility of striking it rich. So, she took a deep breath and put her game face on for Han Feng. This is the second time that she's doing this today. She looked to the ground and started trembling lightly. Knowing that Han Feng took his wealthy father to the airport today, she began apologizing for asking him to go shopping without knowing that he'd have a busy schedule. Then the waterworks came down. She started summoning those tears at the perfect time while meekly telling Han Feng that he was so cold to her earlier. She thought he was ditching a good friend. Han Feng smiled with satisfaction. This academy-worthy acting would have worked wonders with the previous him, but things are different now. He could see through it all. This silly girl was a pro. He did not hesitate to hold her by the waist, pulling her closer. His other hand took hold of her chin, and they looked each other in the eye. Lee Hyona was taken aback by the fact that one of her simps was so confidently forward. Han Feng put on an acting masterclass himself, promising to never ditch her as she's way too important for him to do such a cruel thing. For a split second, there was an imperceptible twisted smile on her face, but she quickly wiped it off. Continuing with her sincere, sweet girl act, she brought out the big guns. Lee Hyona admitted that Han Feng's pretty special in her life too. She even invited him to have lunch and watch a movie today so she could get to know him better. Just as she was about to ask for his answer, Han Feng was already gone like the wind. It was the perfect, unnoticeable escape. Hyona was speechless. Her heartfelt confession was actually directed towards nothing but air. Han Feng was already tinkering with the piles of boxes in the back of his truck. He was playfully complaining about how he still has to carry so many things and how busy his schedule is. Clearly infuriated that her attack did not land, Lee Hyona tried her best to keep her sweet girl composure as she asked why he bought so much stuff. He replied that this much is nothing special. He just grabbed some things he likes. To torment the witch even further, Han Feng lied through his teeth and enthusiastically told her that he got a present for the lady too. Not wanting to overplay her hand, Lee Hyona waved goodbye as she walked in the direction of her home. She smiled and said that she was looking forward to that gift. As soon as she turned her back towards Han Feng, her supposed biggest simp, a sly smile appeared on her lips, proud of how she dealt with her piggy bank. On the other hand, Han Feng was just having fun messing with the witch. Knowing this woman, he knew that he couldn't let her find out about his little stockpile of supplies. All this stuff will be his ticket to surviving the apocalypse after all. Lee Hyuna will just have to wait for her turn. Once the world ends, Han Feng will make sure that she gets what's coming to her. That mystery guy who bashed him on the head too. His anxiety about the incoming inevitable collapse of society is starting to melt. Han Feng is actually starting to look forward to what's coming now. The next day came, June 29th. Again, July 15th will be D-Day. It will be the beginning of the end. First comes the heavy snow, then the temperature will drastically plummet down to negative 20 degrees Celsius at an alarming rate. Over the next month after that, temperatures will continue to gradually drop day by day, reaching lows of up to negative 70 degrees Celsius. At that point, the world would be encased in ice and snow completely, making it almost impossible to go outside. The first thing that Han Feng secured was his bountiful food supplies. Aside from the sheer volume of stock, he also needs everything packed and sealed securely. He can't let the neighbors sense that something's going on. They can't suspect that he's hoarding copious amounts of food. This was tiring work. Some of the sensitive supplies had to be moved at night when no one was around. Han Feng doesn't trust anyone enough to help, so he has to do it on his own. Once the apocalyptic ice age starts, the power grid will be extremely unstable. That's where his newest purchase shines. A heavy-duty generator plus enough fuel to keep it running for a whole year at the very least. With power secured, he now has to consider the fatal consequence of the building's heating system stopping. He had to call in some specialized contractors to modify his home for independent heating. Han Feng also ordered some reinforced doors and windows while he was at it. He needed a dedicated room to store all the supplies that he had hoarded, so he used an empty bedroom for all the essentials. By the time he finished preparing everything listed in his little notebook of survival, it was already July 14th. Just one more day before the temperature plummets and everything descends to chaos. Next up on his list is the main event that he's been postponing out of uncertainty all this time. It is time to buckle down and actually study his mysterious ability. Han Feng made a home-cooked meal for dinner while pondering his survival in the incoming Ice Age apocalypse. When things get hard, relying solely on the supplies he has accumulated won't be enough. But he has a possible answer to this problem. His power to manipulate plants in some mystical way might be his only hope for a sustainable future. The meal he cooked featured soybeans as its main ingredient. That's right, the same beans he conjured from a single roasted snack using his ability. He racked his brain and tried so many gestures and possible triggers, but the lights hadn't come out yet. The activation is so random that finding the right trigger is nearly impossible. For now, it is time for a risky taste test. He needs to make sure the food conjured by his abilities is edible. Who knew that trying some beans would be so nerve-wracking? Han Feng got through half the plate of his beans with no apparent problems at all. Even the soy milk passed the taste and safety test. While chewing on his lunch, the confirmation that his ability could provide edible food was game-changing. At least this proved that he has the ability to theoretically spawn food. The next step is the harder and more trial-and-error-based one. He needs to figure out how to actually use the red and green lights and make them appear according to his will. So far, he has only tried it on soybeans, but what would happen if he could use it on other things? Opening his newly stocked fridge, Han Feng steeled his resolve to experiment and see if his ability would work with other plants too. The testing period stretched from midday until the sun was about to set. Han Feng did not know that as he passed out in the middle of experimentation. As he slowly opened his eyes, he noticed that he was gripping something tightly in his right hand. A green vegetable of some kind. A massive broccoli. Slowly getting up from the floor, he could not be bothered by the absolute mess that was in his kitchen, as the pain in his head was hellish. It felt like something was pounding from inside his skull. He has to take note of this sensation in the future. This power of his takes a severe toll on the mind and the body, and it cannot be used without restrictions unless he wants to pass out and wake up with a migraine every day. After getting up, he immediately got a spoonful of his beans to refuel again. He might have pushed himself to the limit today, but at least he learned something vital about this mysterious ability of his. A few hours ago, before he blacked out, he neatly arranged a diverse selection of produce on the kitchen floor. He tried using his power on a bunch of them after he managed to activate the green light. Some root crops like potatoes did not react to his green light at all for some unknown reason. But not all of them were duds. Some of the crops grew from the seeds into full-blown plants like the soybean stalks. Wheat was one of those. And some neither stayed the same nor grew into full-blown crops. They just exploded in his hands like mini-bombs. It was a frightening experience that caught Han Feng off guard. After those explosions, the plants would turn into a substance that looked like coal but was very light. This development was certainly outside of his expectations. Thankfully, he could find some decent use for these inedible black substances. They are used to heat the space like coal when put together in a container and lit up. Coming from a future where heat was a luxury, Han Feng would gladly take these little balls of warmth. No more worrying about staying warm in the future. After a bunch of explosions, he tried many more times and failed most of them. He just kept chucking those black balls into the bucket one by one. When he got into some seeds he bought, he chose to take a more meditative stance while forcing himself to focus on controlling his breathing. After a few minutes of intense concentration that left him sweating bullets, he finally got the most significant success in this experiment. A gigantic broccoli shockingly appeared in his grasp. Before his eyes gave out and his consciousness went lights off, he remarked that the success rate of this method was still way too random. Then, his body hit the floor. Thankfully, he was sitting on the tiles already, so the fall wasn't too bad. Now he's awake, and his belly is full of beans. He played around with the broccoli while thinking long and hard and still failing to find any patterns to this ability. But he can't give up. There has to be some kind of principle behind how this ability works. There are still too many unknowns, but he made some decent progress today. At least now he has some understanding of the activating conditions of the lights. Who would have thought that the key to activating the bizarre skill lies in his very own consciousness? All he has to do is enter a meditative trance. His method involves imagining himself out in nature in his bare form, free from the constraints of human civilization. In other words, buck naked. In his mind palace, he walks on the ground with bare feet, his soles making direct contact with the soil where life grows. Sunlight kisses his skin as all life around him harmonizes. Just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, his body and mind are both part of the natural world, a peaceful resonance of all that has life. Once he enters that state of mind, he slowly opens his eyes and a familiar green glow appears once again. This ability of his is directly connected to his consciousness. Working from that concept, he could freely call on the green light. Now that he's done with all the plant samples with a low success rate, it's time to move on to a different type of specimen. The target of the second experiment would be all kinds of meats this time around. So he slowly brought his right hand wrapped with the green light towards a juicy slab of meat. He already half expected it, but it's still disappointing that there were no reactions at all. Maybe the green light only works on plants. Thinking that the gentle approach might not be effective, Han Feng grabbed his meat and squeezed hard while praying that his right hand would work its magic. After a few minutes, he had to accept that nothing would happen. You could see the defeat and dejection in his tired eyes. That was when he thought of the sensation he felt while meditating. In a trance, he could sense two distinct colors, the red and green lights. Throughout the experiments, he hasn't tried using the red one yet. Grasping the primary trigger function of his ability, he only has to concentrate on bringing that red light out of his consciousness. While still holding the meat, he closed his eyes and tried to reach for the other ability lying dormant inside his system. After a little while, a spark of red light finally made an appearance on his right hand. With that initial spark, the glow swiftly wrapped around his hand. Surprisingly, it also wrapped around the piece of meat. It looked like it was creating some sort of bubbling reaction at the meat's surface. A few seconds of intense concentration later, Han Feng opened his eyes to a putrid pile of hardened dark red sludge that looked like it came right out of hell as the red light subsided. He immediately threw that vile thing on the ground out of sheer disgust. You would undoubtedly do that too, in his position. Realizing that this disfigured sludge might provide some valuable insights, Han Feng crouched on the ground to observe it. He poked the thing, and it was a little squishy. So, this is how meats would react to the red light. It might look revolting, but the texture and overall feel point towards the possibility that the meat got cooked or something. Was this really all the red light can do? Heat things up? Stoves and pans could do the same thing, and they could produce more appetizing meals than whatever the hell this is. Han Feng refuses to believe that's all there is to it. Upon using his consciousness to trigger his abilities a fair bit amount, he could understand his capabilities on a deeper level. If he were to describe the red light sensation, it would be like a disintegration process. His next meat experiment looked a lot better than the first one. But if that's the case, understanding the underlying concepts of these two lights might be easier than he initially thought. He grabbed a bunch of soybeans from his bean pile and gripped them hard in his right hand. In his left hand was the red light and the cooked up meat. If the green light represents the evolution of matter, then the red light is the opposite, which would be disintegration. Since he's already testing out some confusing concepts, what would happen if he combined the green light grasping beans and the red light grasping meat? The result was an even bigger reaction than he was expecting. The combination produced a bright, blinding light between his hands. When the lights died down, it was revealed that his meat got a lot bigger as a result. The meat had been supersized, but where did the soybeans in his right hand go? Could it be that the two subjects merged together, producing this giant slab? Han Feng meticulously inspected the big meat. No matter how you look at it, it's undeniably incredible. It looks, feels, and smells exactly like real meat, but even fresher somehow. Gaining some confidence that he's getting a lot better at this superpower thing, he decided to go for some more experiments. After a few hours, he was back to square one once again. His kitchen floor was filled with charred remains of meat and crops. He frustratedly threw a tantrum, and everything he tried failed miserably. Getting all that exasperation out of his system, Han Feng sat up and took a deep breath. He'll just pause the experiments for now. He can always just take his time to figure out its deeper intricacies later. Anyway, today was still a productive one, even though he ended it on a bitter and charred note. Han Feng can already see the future if he can just successfully master this mysterious power. There's no doubt about it. With infinite resources, he would be the man standing at the pinnacle of this post-apocalyptic world. It's his dream. so he could put some sweet muscles in his image. Speaking of power, he might have forgotten one of the most important aspects of survival. Food alone is not going to cut it in the coming days. He will be completely vulnerable with all this loot if he doesn't have a decent weapon to defend himself. He swiftly took the various crops littered around his floor. He has to hurry and find himself a weapon before the temperature goes on a nosedive. Looking out the window, it seems like the initial stages of the apocalypse have already started. Snow is beginning to fall from the skies. It's here. The public might think this is just a typical snowy evening, but it's not. Just like the previous timeline, it really is happening. The collapse of modern civilization is commencing. Heading outside, Han Feng fears that the temperatures will drop to 45 below within the week. He needs a gun, and fast. But buying a gun in this country is illegal, and he doesn't exactly have any connections to the criminal world. That's when he overheard a scandalous man yelling and boasting that he's a construction guy with millions riding on every project. The dude was bragging to a passerby that he knows the infamous Lao Wang from the Shigang Lida group. They're so close. They're practically brothers. Han Feng thinks he's seen this thug before. A dumbass with an exaggerated fashion style, blinged out with jewelry of questionable authenticity and over-the-top streetwear. A guy who offers everyone cigarettes for some reason. Around this area, people refer to this bleached-haired, cigarette-loving thug as Homeless Joe. Homeless Joe's real name is Li Ziyi. He likes it when people call him Brother Li, and he lives in Han Feng's neighborhood. He's reputed to be in charge of contracting projects and knows everyone around the area. If you offer him some cigs, he won't accept any other brands as he only smokes Huazi. Other brands make him cough. He's always helping his big brother with projects and looks forward to going to saunas. In reality, this bum does not have a proper job, but he always acts so busy. You often see him walking around while on a call, shouting out deals worth 20 million or 10 million as if he wants everyone to hear how successful he is. The guy is a deadbeat, but Han Feng can see that maybe Homeless Joe has the necessary connections to get what he so badly needs. So, he approached the thug, referring to him as Brother Li and saying that it's been a long time since they have seen each other. Han Feng waved with an awkward smile as he was uncertain how this guy would respond. Brother Li annoyedly asked if they knew each other as he walked closer. Being younger than Li, he introduced himself as Xiao Han, kind of like saying little bro. He swore that they'd met a while ago, so I must have forgotten. The thug complained that he's been swamped with work lately, so he can't be blamed for his bad memory. But he was pretty receptive to talk. Han Feng was being overly cautious as he was about to ask for something very illegal. He surveyed the area, looking from left to right to make sure that no one could hear what he was about to say. Then, he came up to Brother Li and directly asked for the weapon that he needed to defend himself in the coming days. Li jumped in fright and asked what he would need a gun for. That's not a good sign. Feeling like a guilty criminal, Han Feng still had to push through this as he couldn't think of anyone else who could help him with his problem. Li started speaking seriously, wanting to clear something up before they got any further. He insisted that his organization does not engage in any illegal activities and that guns are serious business. He hinted that he had the connections for it, but he was not one to mix ordinary people up with something dangerous. Han Feng pushed the thug's questionable Louis Vuitton bag out of his face and insisted that Brother Li got it all twisted. He was just inquiring about some firearms for self-defense, as he has been involved in some nasty personal grudge. And so, Han Feng started lying his ass off with a story that he was making up as he spoke. According to him, one day while riding his bike to work like usual, he ran into an old man who was just spitting everywhere on the bike line. It was so gross, and to make matters worse, the wind carried one of those disgusting globs of spit right into Han Feng's face when he was just minding his own business. Angered by the revolting old man, Han Feng threw his bike to the side and confronted the old man. What did the bastard do, you ask? The asshole decided to spit on him again while he was airing out his grievance. He could not take it anymore and brought down some street justice on the disgusting old man. He gave the guy a good old beating in the middle of the road, with everyone watching on the sidelines. As the old man left with his clothes tattered and his face messed up, the bastard swore that he would get back at Han Feng for this humiliation. The very next day, that old man was patched up and waiting for Han Feng on the usual bike route. This time, he had some goons with him. They beat Han Feng up quite badly and threatened to do it again if they ever saw him anywhere. His clothes were a mess, his face was bruised, and his body was wounded. He has never been so humiliated in his life. That is why he wants a weapon for self-defense. That's the long and short version of it. That's the story he could come up with on the spot. And it looks like it was a very effective one. Brother Li was fuming in anger as he imagined the nasty old jerk spitting on the road and hitting Han Feng. Such uncivilized behavior should not be tolerated. That's not really the point of Han Feng's story, but at least he's getting somewhere. Brother Li tapped his shoulders and assured him that this vendetta would be taken care of. He assured Han Feng that he's got our boy covered. He will just make a call to his big brother right now and they'll fetch that gun. Han Feng was starting to doubt if he made the right decision in approaching this guy. With all that tough talk, Brother Li invited him to go to the station and hop on the bus with him. His excuse was that his Panamera was being serviced in the shop, so he couldn't drive to the headquarters. Han Feng assured him that transportation wouldn't be a problem. He has his car parked right to the side, after all. The brand new vehicle immediately caught the eye of this hype beast bum. On the drive over to his big brother, Lee could not stop going on and on about how Han Feng is living the good life and asked how much this new ride costs. It was about 700,000 of borrowed money. As he casually gave directions to turn left at the next intersection to reach the alleged office, Brother Lee kept on snapping pics of himself sitting in the new leather seats. His social media handle was Handsome Spicy Guy, and tonight's post was a picture of his dumbass face with a caption complaining about how his SUV's seat is still too hard to sit in on account of it being new. They pulled up to one of the seedier parts of the city. Some tough-looking guys were camped outside, complaining about the messed up weather. You can't blame them, though. It went straight from summer to hardcore winter overnight. Seeing some crisp-looking wheels pull up, everyone turned to whoever was about to exit that car. Seeing that it was Lee Z, they flocked towards him to ask what was up. Brother Lee just told them that he had some stuff to handle with Boss Liu. The other thugs assumed that the new Tiger SUV belonged to Lee and started hassling him about the price tag. Lee did not deny it at all. He even proudly boasted that he had spent 700 grand for the car. Han Feng was not upset though. Bragging that you own the car so confidently while the actual owner is standing nearby is kind of a goated, shameless move. As soon as they entered the establishment, the one known as Boss Liu, a hardcore gangster-looking man, came out upset that Big Mouth Lee would disturb him so late in the evening. Brother Lee visibly turned a lot more reserved in front of the boss, even offering his cigs politely. The big guy does not have time for any of that filler nonsense, though. He's a busy man. Brother Lee introduced their little brother, Han Feng, as a buyer of something special. A gun. Boss Liu wanted to confirm if he heard that correctly. As soon as the big boss looked him over, Han Feng froze up in fear. He wasn't sure what would happen if he made the wrong move or said the wrong thing. Boss Liu just stared at him silently, cigarette in mouth, seemingly scrutinizing him from head to toe. Then the big guy cracked a smile. He was quite disappointed that Han Feng only needed a lousy gun when he was expecting something more interesting. He gestured towards one of his henchmen, Cheng Zi. The henchman already knew what to do and rummaged through his jacket pocket. He tossed a pistol on the table and Boss Liu quoted a price. 6,000 for the handgun, easy to conceal and reliable. Han Feng humbly rejected it as he was thinking more along the lines of something a little longer and bigger. He was not looking for some low-caliber pea shooter. He wanted something that requires a scope to fire. Boss Liu's expression turned grave as he stared at Han Feng intently. Our boy might have crossed the line unknowingly. He immediately shut up as if he just swallowed his tongue. The big guy started yelling about how unrealistic it is to demand a freaking sniper rifle like it was nothing. He's running a discreet business here. This is not some goddamn shopping mall where you get to pick and choose what kind of illegal product you get. Boss Liu's final offer is the pistol on the table. Take it or leave it. Brother Lee had to run some interference to try to calm the boss down. His idea of convincing the big guy to listen was to invent a backstory for Han Feng on his own. A made-up story that allegedly happened 5 years ago involving Han Feng's non-existent wife. Lee is quite a mouthy but talented storyteller. Under the relentless downfall of Snow, the boss listened to his lies all the way to the end. The story must have been phenomenal, as Boss Liu was so angered that he almost snapped the table in half. He kept repeating how disgusting those who had wronged Han Feng were. Apparently Han Feng had 3 kids with a non-existent wife, but it turned out that none of them were his. Han Feng just stood there and went with all the lies. Even for someone nicknamed Homeless Joe, this ridiculous story was too over the top, but it worked. Boss Liu gave his personal guarantee that Han Feng would get his sniper rifle as soon as possible. He promised that he would personally make it happen, but it might take a few days. Once again, the henchman Xiangzi will be arranging everything. Boss Liu wanted something semi-automatic with loads of ammo too, so Han Feng could have what he needed. It's unexpected, but Brother Lee definitely came in clutch. The big guy also handed Han Feng the handgun. He wanted to give it for free. A gift from one man to another. Han Feng was speechless. The made-up story was so good that the boss had formed some kind of one-sided bond with him. Now that it was taken care of, the big guy got back on his phone to take care of his other, more pressing businesses. Before leaving, Han Feng wanted to return the favor a little bit. He stated that a buddy of his who works for the government had told him that due to the abnormal weather, purchase limits for supplies will be implemented soon, so it's best to stock up before that happens. Seeing the serious look in the young man's eyes, as if he actually knew what he was talking about, Boss Liu could not help but take the tip seriously too. He nodded in understanding and remarked that he got it. And so, Brother Lee and Han Feng exited the center of the city's underbelly with one firearm secured. On the way back, Lee could not stop bragging about how he handled business like a boss, and it went beautifully. Now that his big brother, the big boss, is in a good mood, they could even ask that guy for a cannon, and he'd say yes. Han Feng wanted to thank the thug by buying him some cigarettes. Brother Lee tried to be humble and insisted that he did what he did just to help him, but he would gladly take about 7 to 8 cartons of his beloved Huazi cigs. He even promised to take Hanfeng to a sauna once he got paid for his so-called project. Our boy was already thinking about his next logical move. Supplies are secured and the weapon is obtained. He should be set for the early days of the apocalypse, at the very least. He can focus on studying his abilities. Fully solving the food problem would make his long-term survival chances skyrocket. He was so absorbed in his own world while walking that he didn't notice an icy part on the ground and slipped. Hanfeng was so concerned with survival that he failed to follow one of the ironclad rules in the upcoming ice age. Do not get injured. He fell quite badly. His leg must have absorbed the impact of the slip and had been damaged severely. Brother Lee didn't know what to do as he ran towards his new pal's side. This is bad. From the sharp pain he was feeling and the awkward landing, there was a very real possibility that his leg was broken. He shakily took his car keys out, handed them over to Brother Lee, and requested to be taken to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. Lee just scratched the back of his head and admitted that he actually doesn't have a driver's license, insisting that he can't drive without one. But it's safe to say that this bum just can't drive, period. At least he didn't leave Hanfeng on the floor to writhe in the pain of a broken leg. He offered his shoulders to lift Hanfeng up, but he struggled hard to do so. Both of them wouldn't make it to the hospital alive at this rate, so Hanfeng just called a taxi that he had to pay for since Lee is a broke bastard. Even the hospital, an essential establishment, was starting to freeze over under the intensifying blizzard. In the nurse's office, someone named Jian was left to take care of the night shift on this whiteout night. The snow was getting heavier, and the roads were starting to get buried deep. Head nurse Jian had only just started her night shift, but calls coming from the hall were already flooding in as the emergency section was severely short-staffed. The pretty nurse had no other choice but to step up. Upon getting an x-ray in the hospital, it was confirmed that he had really broken his leg. The doctor explained that there was a stable fracture on his right tibia. It would be easy to set, but he'd need to stay for an hour of observation before going home with his meds. This accident could not have happened at a worse time. It just had to occur before the apocalypse went into full swing. While looking at his x-ray results, Hanfeng regretted being so careless. Brother Lee accompanied him for most of the process, but the dude had to leave as he apparently had a few deals to handle. He's a real one though, and he even left his number in case Hanfeng needed anything else. Now that he was alone in the hospital lobby, Hanfeng sighed heavily. He wondered how he could make such a stupid mistake at such a crucial time. Looking at the chaos around him was stressful. The hospital quickly overflowed with patients, victims of accidents caused by the sudden blizzard and quickly plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds lined the hallways as a grim testament to the worsening conditions outside. As for him personally, he just wanted to get his meds and leave this place as fast as possible before the roads closed for good. Thankfully, his idle time would not be boring as a goddess had just walked right in front of him. Head nurse Jian had come to bolster the understaffed emergency room. The first bed she checked had a patient with heavy wounds. Next on her rotation was bed 5, where a patient's wounds had just been cleaned. Thankfully, the vitals were stable. Bed 5 just needed another dose of glucose in 10 minutes. She advised the attending nurse that if the patient's heart rate dropped below 80, epinephrine must be administered immediately. Throughout the rounds of the head nurse, Hanfeng could not take his eyes off her. She was just amazing. Being a head nurse at such a young age, she must be a generational talent. On top of that, he saw how she dealt with all kinds of patients. She was kind and incredibly skilled. She looked like a radiant being in the middle of a hopeless place. Moreover, she was incredibly beautiful. She was working the hectic night shift, but her smile never faltered. She was basically an angel. He was so enamored that his eyes accidentally traveled to some ungentlemanly areas. Hanfeng immediately averted his gaze out of respect. But head nurse Jian was just way too unaware of her surroundings. A real airhead. Suddenly, the old man sitting beside him started calling the attention of the pretty head nurse. She was not really required to tend to the patients outside of her rounds, but she still took the call with a smile. Head nurse Jian politely apologized to the old man and asked if she could come back a bit later to help, as she still needed to provide urgent care to some patients to cover for the staff shortage. The old man complained that his back hurt too much. He explained that the back pain had been worsening lately and wanted the head nurse to take a look to see what was causing it. In reality, this bastard was just a dirty perv trying to film below her skirt. Not noticing what was really happening, Jian just smiled and apologized once again, saying that for such back problems, they might need to schedule an x-ray just to be sure. The old perv started getting pushy, urging her to just take a quick look as he pointed to where it hurt. The bastard even got up from his seat to touch the angelic nurse inappropriately. Being the airhead that she usually was, Jian just laughed as she was naturally ticklish. For back problems, it's really advisable to wait for the resident physician's exam. The perv started pushing it, his hand crawling even lower from her waist. This disgusting act would have continued longer if something or someone had not made it stop. A freaking flying crutch forcefully smashed against the old perv, giving him some real back pain and knocking the phone away from his hands. Ever the kind-hearted healthcare worker, Jian wanted to check if the old man was all right. Thankfully, Hanfeng came to her rescue, humbly apologizing for his crutch flying to the side as this was the first time he was using one. He bent over and went straight for the old perv's phone while blatantly questioning if it was broken or not. Just as he was about to touch it, the perv started sweating nervously and screaming at him to stay away from the phone. Han Feng did not listen. He walked all the way to the side of the room, got his bandage all messed up, and wouldn't let this freaking lecher get away with doing something so disgusting. As soon as he opened the phone, his suspicions were proven right. He looked at the creep directly in the eyes. If looks could kill, the geezer would have died by now. The proof was already there on the home screen. This perv had some nerve filming up a hard-working nurse's skirt and even assaulting her. There's no good reason why Han Feng shouldn't call security and have them escort the bastard to a jail cell where criminals love putting pervs in their place. Han Feng would be keeping the phone, and the next time he saw this old creep again, he threatened to ruin his miserable and revolting life. The old bastard knew he had no other choice but to flee and never show himself near this place again, and it infuriated him. The first chance he got up from that hospital floor and bolted out of the door like his life depended on it. Meanwhile, head nurse Jian was just confused as to how someone complaining about severe back pain could run so fast. Han Feng was shocked to see a first-hand display of the most comically naive person he had ever met. He decided to show her what the old fart was doing with the phone, filming up her skirt. Based on her reaction, she really did not notice anything wrong going on. Han Feng handed her the phone with the video footage so she could decide whether to wipe it or call the cops on the owner. He also reminded her to be more careful, so people like that perv wouldn't take advantage of her kindness. She smiled with the brightness of 1,000 stars and then asked if Han Feng's leg was supposed to be injured. The adrenaline from catching that old perv in the act must have numbed the pain from his broken leg, but now that it was dealt with, the pain came rushing back in, and he screamed in agony. Thankfully, head nurse Jian was an expert when it came to mending these types of injuries, and quickly set the casting back in place. She looked at him and asked if it still hurt. Han Feng thanked her for dealing with his broken leg, and now, it didn't hurt at all. At that moment, it was as if only the two of them existed in the crowded room. Jian returned the gratitude as she promised to never let such bad guys get away with messing with her anymore. She would punch them really well from now on. Han Feng just wanted her to be more aware of her surroundings. Seeing as she was letting his broken leg and feet touch her front pillows, it seemed like she had not learned anything at all. She was still as clueless and unaware as ever. While Han Feng's head was in the clouds, another nurse called for Jian as her help was needed on the emergency beds. Before going back to her rounds, the angelic head nurse reminded him not to forget to come back in a week to get his leg checked again. Han Feng promised that he would, but making any plans a week from now was unrealistic. He just smiled, helplessly, for only he knew what was really going on in the world. He took the crutch that he smashed against the old perv and limped his way out of the hospital. Han Feng just accepted the fact that he wouldn't be able to see her ever again. The next day came, and the blizzard had not stopped. It had gotten even stronger instead. It had essentially frozen all infrastructure and services, making just going outside a dangerous challenge. On the morning news, emergency weather reports kept coming in about how, within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country would be experiencing heavy snowfall and a sharp drop in temperatures. Bizarre reports from overseas correspondents showed that temperatures were plummeting in every corner of the world. Dubai, Egypt, the Amazon basin, and places that should not be experiencing this type of phenomenon were seeing their land masses buried in thick blankets of snow. The nation's experts, along with specialists from 46 other countries, were rushing to the United Nations to discuss the cause of the anomalous weather. Every network kept echoing that the experts said this severe cold snap wouldn't last too long. They always ended their news reports with a public service announcement to pay attention to disaster warnings and follow arrangements made by the local government. They kept reminding citizens to remain calm, avoid spreading or believing in unfounded rumors, and refrain from hoarding supplies and panic buying, as the disaster would soon pass. Warm, cozy, and sipping wine inside his decked-out home, Han Feng clicked his tongue. The government and media just kept lying through their teeth, feeding the public BS to maintain order. If he hadn't died and come back to life already, he might even believe them. But this time was different. He was well prepared for everything that was about to come. Supplies were fully stocked. The house was reinforced, and the heating system was working flawlessly. He had been so well prepared that there was nothing to worry about for the immediate future. His phone started buzzing incessantly with messages from the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat, discussing the weird weather and how the snow was already making the roads unusable. Everyone was clearly clueless about what was happening, but not the member nicknamed Mysterious Person. Whoever this was demanded everyone's attention to inform them that the snowstorm wasn't caused by normal weather patterns, but by something within the Earth itself. Mysterious Person proclaimed that everyone should heed his words as the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. No one was more shocked after reading those messages than Han Feng. Who the hell is this mysterious person, and how do they know anything about the apocalypse? I guess we'll only find out if you like and subscribe. After seeing the enigmatic messages from the mysterious person in the housing complex group chat, Han Feng made a mental note to be mindful of this guy. Meanwhile, the rest of the residents were complaining and demanding the property management team do something about the snow buildup. Most of them were starting to run out of supplies and were worried that the supermarkets would be emptied out. At this point in time, the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat was like an amusement park hinging on a very delicate balance. Most tenants were putting pressure on the property agents to get out and give them an explanation for why they couldn't restock essentials due to the inaccessibility of roads. The property management team was not even at fault here, but they still apologized for not being able to take any steps on account of the raging disaster. An admission of incapability made the tenants even more aggressive. Thinking that the management was useless, they demanded that the team refund their fees. Han Feng was in the middle of this heated discussion. He knew that this was a completely meaningless fight, as the snowstorm wasn't something humans could deal with. Thankfully, another person stood out from the crowd. His voice to stop the fighting pierced through the loud chaos. It was the glasses-wearing owner of Unit 611-1204. He explained that with the snowstorm being so heavy, clearing it out would be useless as it would build up again after a few hours. So, instead of fighting, maybe everyone could help clear it out. If they had done that, instead of bickering, they would have been able to go out long ago. He added that the property management team was just humans. They were also helpless in front of an abnormal natural disaster. He asked the tenants if they were just looking for someone to take their frustrations out on. The angry mob immediately turned on him for lecturing them about decency. They even accused the glasses guy of being one of the useless members of the property management team. Glasses cleared up that he was not speaking on behalf of the property management team. He was just speaking objectively and realistically. Pushing management into a corner would be meaningless and would only prolong the problem. It wouldn't get them the result everyone desired. Now that he put it like that, the people turned to Glasses for the next move. He asserted that with the current conditions, driving a car to the supermarket would be impossible. Even if they cleared the neighborhood snow, the main roads outside might be unusable. He suggested clearing footpaths and walking over for supply runs. Han Feng couldn't quite put a finger on it, but he seemed to have some recollection of this Glasses guy, owner Zhang. In the previous life, he was a very lively person. You could see his charisma working on the group chat. Some of the tenants agreed with Zhang's suggestions, thinking that they shouldn't complicate the matter. Those who wanted to go out should clear the roads. Those who didn't should just shut up. Fighting and acting immaturely in the chat for half a day just to clear some snow was very annoying. Once everyone realized that what they were doing was cringe, the GC finally quieted down. Another person stepped up to volunteer in the clearing operation. He said he needed to hit the roads to go to his brother to discuss business worth a few million. Han Feng might not have seen a profile picture or a voice message, but that guy's manner of speaking seemed very similar to that of some gangster he knew. As soon as the first volunteer stepped up, more and more people raised their hands to join the operation, as most of them were running out of food. There was even a dazzling young lady who would brave the snowstorm, even though she was a little weaker than an average person. As for that witch, Lee Hyona claimed that she had the flu over the past 2 days, but she would still love to go down and help with the neighborhood. Han Feng was unimpressed, to say the least. He might be the only one who could see through the good girl act. Most of the men in this neighborhood knew her and would fawn over her. Some white knight immediately butted in and insisted on volunteering for her sake. When a decent amount of her fans stepped up to the plate, she thanked them for going through the trouble of cleaning up a footpath. Tired of this BS, Han Feng got out of that group chat with annoyance. But he had to admit that when it came to putting on an act, Hyun was really an expert. With just a few taps of a button, she could manipulate multiple men to do her bidding. As for Han Feng, Lee Hyuna was using a little more personal touch. She had been bugging him to chat. Ultimately, she just wanted him to get her some food from the supermarket if he was going. She really was a master of her craft. Her innocent request was accompanied by a cute photo in her bed. She even had her feet in the frame for all the freaks out there. Han Feng was actually very impressed with the commitment. In these catastrophic weather conditions, the witch was still wearing so little to try and seduce him. She could really turn a lot of men into errand boys with that. Now was the fun part. Han Feng could reply to her advances however he wanted. Well, whatever he sent back must have been some awful crap, as Lee Hyuna tossed her phone and stepped on it hard in anger and annoyance as soon as she saw it. Today would make it the 3rd official day since the snowfall started. The temperature had reached -20. This could be regarded as the early stage of the apocalypse, a time when most buildings of decent quality still had central heating systems running. They still had the internet, and everyone was still going on with their daily lives as usual. They just needed to stay inside, just like COVID times. Han Feng had been scrolling through videos and TikToks to pass his time as well. Based on his page, it looked like we had a certified man of culture. It had only been a few days, and he was already getting bored with the mindless indoor activities. It looked like his most significant problem in this apocalypse would be learning how to endure loneliness. It also didn't help that his leg was a broken mess. A broken bone would need at least a few months to completely recover. Just like us, Han Feng's boredom always led back to watching videos on the internet. He came across a gruesome broadcast in the scientific column about a man who got into a brutal accident. After doctors sewed up the man who jumped from the 15th floor, they discovered that his damaged internal organs and bones started regenerating. This clickbait news story gave Han Feng an idea. It's one that he really should have come up with a lot earlier. Why had he not thought of using his newfound powers on himself? He activated the green light in his right hand and carefully touched his broken leg with it. After a few seconds of nothing happening, the green light started dissipating. Hanfeng refused to believe that it was a bust, so he tried again. He activated the green light harder than he did before, but just like earlier, the light eventually died down with no change in his leg. It looked like he was just overthinking things. He really thought that the green light would be able to help his injury recover faster, but it seemed like the only thing it brought was irresistible sleepiness. Hanfeng eventually succumbed to the heaviness of his eyes and took a nap on the couch. He woke up to some freaky-ass ceremony that involved goats and Native American headdresses. Under the transcendent light of the night skies, Hanfeng rode on the back of giant goats with a bloody whip in his hands. Goat heads flew alongside him. In this freaky ceremony, Hanfeng is riding at the forefront of a goat herd on top of a bloody red grassland. There are totem poles scattered along the land, and he is having fun whipping his whip all around the place. Well, that fun only lasts for a minute before he is tossed off the goat's back and into the herd. He eventually lands on the blood-red grassland, and he lands badly. His foot is at an awkward angle and a crack can be heard. It makes him shiver in pain. To come from the absolute freedom of riding goats in the grassland to being immobile on the ground is quite jarring. To make matters worse, one of the goats starts licking his broken leg. Disgusted, Hanfeng tries his hardest to shoo the goat away from him and his unfortunate injury. He pushes the goat over and over again until the animal finally snaps. It extends its tongue like a frog, wrapping that slimy piece around his affected leg. Then the goat raises its head, and Hanfeng's whole body comes along helplessly. While feeling the slimy saliva running down his leg, he also starts feeling the warmth of the green light wrapping around his injury. Hanfeng eventually wakes up from that bizarre nightmare that involves a lot of goats. He is sweating and screaming. The dream is just too immersive. While he labors to catch his breath, he wonders just what caused that hideously messy dream. Well, the answer presents itself quite loudly. His broken right leg still has some leftover green light aura surrounding it. Furthermore, Hanfeng senses a certain lightness in his limbs. He promptly takes off the bandage wrapping around his injury and tosses it to the side. Hanfeng excitedly steps on the floor and carefully puts more weight on his right leg. He is pleased and surprised to confirm that the injury does not hurt anymore. He is fully healed for some reason. This should mean that the green light could also help with self-recovery, right? But could the healing process only take place while he's sleeping? There is only one way to find out, and that's by trying it out again in a localized body part. He shakily takes the sharpest kitchen knife he has and slowly puts it up against his other hand. Stealing his resolve, Hanfeng cannot even watch while the blade's edge touches his flesh. He only needs a little prick, but the wound he makes on his fingertip flows quite freely with blood. Not wasting another second with a bleeding wound, Hanfeng calls upon the green light to do its thing. Upon seeing the healing process up close and personal, Hanfeng smiles to himself. He understands now. He has a real survival game-changer in his hands. Outside the building, those who volunteered to clear up a footpath diligently worked together for the good of the community. Glasses guy. Thanks everyone for participating in this difficult manual work. This Mr. Perfect even singles out the oldest of the bunch, Uncle Liu, and politely apologizes for all the trouble. Jiang Shuiyu really knows what to say in any situation. Uncle Liu Guangyao just laughs and insists that he didn't do much as most of the actual work was done thanks to the Jin brothers. Those two, Jin Qinwen and Jin Qinwu, really went all out for the clearing operation. Some real hard workers. While they are busy finishing up the final touches, a young lady wearing a thick pink coat slips on the ice. The Jin brothers immediately rush toward the lady to check if she's okay, and remind her to be more careful. This pink girlie is known as Jin Jian. She's a real doer, unlike that witch Li Hyuna, who didn't even leave her room after playing sick. The Jin brothers still have a lot to do, so they just remind Jin Jian to call for them if she needs help. She assures them that she'll be fine. Well, the snow is getting heavier. Those who are planning to buy some supplies later will have to move quickly. Speaking of supplies, Uncle Liu is reminded of something that he noticed a few weeks ago. Uncle Liu stops himself from babbling, thinking that what he has to say wouldn't be anything significant, but Jiang Shuiyu curiously presses him on. The old man has been hearing that for the past few days or weeks, an owner in the neighborhood has been bringing back supplies on a small truck, like he's moving houses. Jiang Shuiyu thinks that this is a common sight, as there are always people moving into the neighborhood and houses undergoing renovations. But Uncle Liu got different vibes from this one. He saw gas tanks and a whole fireplace being shipped in. It's not normal for someone to move in or anything like that. It's just a hunch, but Uncle Liu thinks that the person was making preparations to get through a harsh winter. This conversation is interrupted by the Jin brothers, who have just finished clearing the main path. People should be able to go out now. Uncle Liu promptly thanked them for going all out. But unbeknownst to everyone, there's another tenant listening in from earlier. He heard talks about making preparations for the winter, and his morbid interest has been piqued. This weirdo is quickly neutralized by a snowball landing on the back of his head. Wu Kuan-yu is brought down a peg by this gorgeous woman, Liu Yan. The weirdo tries to argue that he's been doing everything alone since earlier, and she's just been watching from the side. But Liu Yan just dismisses him as an unruly child. Zhang Xueyu breaks up the fight between the two and informs them that the main path has been cleared and is now good to go. This means that the volunteers can stop shoveling and get ready to head out to the supermarket for supplies instead. Looking at their shopping list, it seems like the Jin brothers have a lot to buy. They even want to buy some for their mom, thinking that she's going to need it. These two are good sons. For someone who didn't want to share the story earlier, Uncle Liu seems way too curious about Zhang Xueyu's thoughts on the matter of that tenant who brought in a ton of supplies. Truthfully speaking, Zhang Xueyu doesn't feel too concerned about hearsay. He still believes what the government and the authorities say, that this is just a brief snowstorm that will stop very soon. They only need to endure for a bit. Then they can return to normal. So, he's not too worried about those mysterious deliveries. But even if they step back and assume that this snowstorm is here to stay, if someone in the neighborhood is hoarding a massive stockpile of resources, isn't that a good thing for everyone? Uncle Liu immediately understands what Zhang Xueyu is implying. He praises the young one for being brainy. Under the ruthless snowfall with no signs of stopping, Zhang Xueyu leads some of the tenants to the supermarket. He makes sure that everyone queues up properly. With the snow getting heavier, they need to try and get back within 3 hours. If they get past the 3-hour mark, who knows if they'll even have a road to walk back on. While those brave souls enter the unknown and endure the harsh environment, Han Feng is passed out in his warm and cozy living room, drooling on himself. He would have stayed holed up on this couch forever with all the soda and junk food to tide him over the dull day, if not for the annoying voice calling him to the door. Han Feng lazily opens his door. He wipes the sleep from his eyes and sees homeless Joe. I mean Brother Lee. Well, the smooth-talking gangster has come in clutch once again. Hidden inside a big bag is a semi-automatic rifle complete with a proper crosshair. It's precisely what Han Feng wanted. This was the promised gift from Boss Liu. Brother Lee had agreed to bring it because he had stocked up on supplies beforehand and could now afford not to run around the city like crazy looking for supplies like most of the other citizens. But even so, Han Feng was grateful to him for coming in this weather. Brother Lee also had some very interesting information that various rumors had already started to spread about. Last night, some unknown person had cleaned out the shelves of a supermarket in the Eastern District. And when the Boss Liu gang cleared their way out of the snow yesterday, they were met with nothing but emptiness in the supermarket. To Han Feng, something like this seemed unbelievable, to completely clean out a huge supermarket in one night. Who could be capable of such a thing? However, there was no doubt in Brother Lee's words, and it had definitely happened. Han Feng was now beginning to realize that something even stranger than in his previous life was happening around him. It looked like he wasn't the only one who had gained superpowers. For a second, his thoughts were interrupted by Brother Lee. He advised Han Feng to wear more warm clothes and be careful. After that, he said goodbye and left. Finally, our hero could be alone and think things over. He kept trying to think of a logical explanation for what had happened last night. How could someone clean out a supermarket in one night? The only explanation he could think of was the theory that it could have been done by someone with superpowers from novels and comic books. Someone capable of hiding unlimited amounts of supplies in his personal subspace. The only question was, could people with such abilities exist in this world? And the answer to that question was quite simple. Since he himself had superpowers, someone else could too. This was a disturbing discovery. Now Han Feng couldn't waste a moment. He needed to examine his superpowers more thoroughly, so that when he encountered other superpower holders, he would have his own strategy to counter them. He simply had to know his strengths and weaknesses, as well as the limit of his superpowers. To do so, he opened his diary, and began to study the already known facts about his powers. At this point, he already knew that his power could react with different foods, both plant and animal. With its help, he could quickly grow them, increase their volume, and also fry them, though with a terrible taste. But still. Unfortunately, there were limitations, which he learned about later. The likelihood of success of power application is not that great and differs for different products. For example, for soybeans, the chance of growing a plant is 10%. For meat, it's even less. Han Feng kept failing to understand why things worked the way they did. Suddenly, the soybean under the influence of the force exploded in his hand with an unpleasant green cloud. And instead of a normal plant, our hero had a rock in his hand. Just a stinky rock. This was starting to annoy him. The failure rate was too high. Han Feng had to learn how to use his power more effectively. And he was determined to start practicing hard. After all, nothing helps you learn any skill faster than practice. For this purpose, he spared no time and worked hard until late in the evening. Finally, he succeeded. In his hands, Han Feng had a fresh and alive soybean plant with pods. Such an achievement did not come easy to him. He was sweating profusely and was already quite a good heater for his apartment. But that was the price he had to pay to figure out a few rules to increase the success rate. He found out that green light energy is not constant. And for different products, it is worth applying this green light for different lengths of time, depending on the nutritional value of the product. If you do not guess the duration of application, you will end up with a failure and get a burnt, stinky stone. That is, you need to know exactly the ideal cooking interval for each product. This brings to mind Han Feng. Something familiar. One popular music and dance online game that came out a decade ago, where you had to press the right buttons in rhythm at the right interval. It was also conceivable that the value of energy could be compared to the directions, up, down, right, and left. And the value of the energy input to the object had to be correct every second. And eventually a critical point had to be caught, and the process had to be stopped. If you do it right, you'll achieve success, and every soybean will become a plant. After the success with plants, Han Feng began experimenting with meat. Obviously, but meat was different from vegetables. If you did something wrong in the process, the meat would then turn into a disgusting black slurry. However, the principles in turning meat were still supposed to be similar. The first place to start was to determine how much energy the meat needed. Everything seemed to be working and going according to plan. But here's the problem. The chicken leg exploded just like the previous ones with a nasty black slurry. It looked like it would take him even longer to learn how to work with meat than with plant food. Time after time, Han Feng tried and failed. The chicken legs exploded one after another. There seemed to be no end to this series of failures. Finally, our hero's patience ran out. He even cried out in despair, cursing this damn ability with an increased level of difficulty. However, the hero was not one to give up, and while the snowfall outside the window only intensified and the temperature dropped even lower, Han Feng did not stop trying. Traces of it were all over the kitchen. And then came the moment of truth. The last chicken leg. Our hero was already doing everything on automatic with an absent expression on his face and did not even hope for success. Up and down, left and right, red and green energy. It felt like an overly complicated mini-scale game to him. It was repeated one after another, and as soon as he made a mistake, he had to start all over again. The tension was at an all-time high, and this time Han Feng succeeded. He managed to grow the chicken leg to a gigantic size. With a snort of disdain, our hero said that it was worth it, and collapsed exhausted but happy on the floor. He had finally found a way to synthesize meat. The weather outside was getting worse by the day. The news announced that today, July 17th, was the third consecutive day of snow disaster. In every corner of the country, the same thing is happening, and it seems that mankind is facing a disaster that happens only once in a few thousand years. In order to ensure the basic livelihood of citizens, the authorities are actively fighting the consequences and taking measures to help citizens. It was to such news that Han Feng woke up the next day. How many times had he heard it before? Empty warnings and promises about how the heavy snowfall had paralyzed transportation, electricity, and internet. But everything would be repaired soon, and all they needed to do was wait a little longer. Soon, humanitarian supplies should arrive in the disaster areas. Finally, the news anchor advised everyone to stay indoors and not to go outside unnecessarily. For Han Feng, there was nothing surprising in all of this. He had heard all of this in his past life. Suddenly, a notification came on his phone, followed instantly by several more. Han Feng immediately saw that it was a group of residents of his house who had started making noise again, and he simply couldn't help but join in the discussion. The noise around was unbelievable. Everyone was discussing the morning news. Some believed that the rescuers would come and help them. Others thought it was all empty promises and made plans to save themselves. Only one avatar stood out from the crowd and asked the gullible if they really believed what was being said on the news. It was old Uncle Liu, and he absolutely did not believe what was being said on TV. If everything was under the control of the government, the rescue teams would have arrived long ago. Instead, he had heard rumors from old friends that the government was assembling armored vehicles, tanks, and other heavy weapons in City A, the capital of the country. They are probably preparing for the war that is about to break out. After hearing the very real possibility of an all-out war against an unknown enemy, a chilling silence swept through the group chat full of paranoid survivors. Then came the eruption of concerns, asking Uncle Liu if what he said was true. If it was, weren't they basically done for? Meanwhile, Han Feng was just fascinated by the coming up of the issue of war. He had heard something about this progression in his previous life. Mr. Zhang interjected to quiet all the noise. He asserted that if what Uncle Liu said was true, then they had to start taking survival measures to save everyone. Some owners in the neighborhood had already run out of supplies. With support resources from the government still uncertain, he proposed organizing for those who were facing difficulties. He passionately suggested that those with ample supplies donate some of their stash. To serve as an example, Mr. Zhang pledged to donate half of his supplies to anyone in need. Other owners quickly discussed what was being put forward in hushed tones. One guy wholeheartedly agreed with Mr. Zhang's proposal, as everyone was just trying to get through the crisis. He pledged to donate what he could and even roped in Li Hyona. She knew this crazy guy, Wu Kuan-yu. That man was trying to humiliate her in front of everyone just because she rejected him before. So, Li Hyona had to play some defense, bringing out her meek girl persona while apologizing as she didn't have any spare supplies left. Most of her simps immediately jumped to defend the witch. This little commotion almost made the plan to organize impossible, as they couldn't even unite themselves with selfless acts. But donations eventually started pouring in. A lot of people must have been moved by Mr. Zhang's impassioned speech. Food, clothing, medicine, all the necessities were put forth. Mr. Zhang expressed his gratitude to those who were willing to help. Since there were quite a lot of people to manage, he thought it wise to appoint some owners to take charge of the operation. He would naturally lead the team. It would be an interim emergency committee responsible for planning and distributing donated supplies. Han Feng smirked as soon as he read the announcement. This interim committee thing happened in his previous life too. Sometime later, it would be revealed that it was all a scheme to take other people's resources. Today was the 19th of July, the 5th day of the apocalypse. Temperatures outside had already dropped to -40 degrees. Now was finally the day when the building's central heating system was no longer running due to the extreme frost. Everyone was desperately thinking and trying ways to keep their bodies warm without the convenience of heaters. Some managed to make a tiny fire inside their homes. It was the same as the previous timeline. It was terrible now, but the situation would only continue to get worse. The exception to this was our MC, of course. Han Feng was set with all his failed experimental charcoals, perfect for fueling his fireplace. On the table was a fizzy iced cola and a scrumptious slice of strawberry cake. As for Han Feng himself, he was doing what most of us would do in his situation. Playing single-player video games while not giving a damn about the outside world. But his peace would be interrupted by a sudden phone call. Taking a break from gaming, he picked up the call while sipping on Coke. On the line was the person in charge of Block 8. They planned to clear the roads in 20 minutes and were in need of manpower in the basement car park. Han Feng resisted cursing this random guy out. These people still didn't get it yet. The snow wouldn't stop piling up. Against his will, Han Feng still chooses to leave the comfort of his home and go down to the main lobby. He reckoned falling out with the neighbors would be troublesome now. He must lower the possibility of his secret being discovered after all. From the first look at the gate, everyone could see the snow had already trapped them in the building. Other volunteers were pissed that the paths they had cleared before had been erased with the highest snow pile they'd ever seen. Deciding to at least get the door open, the volunteers saw Han Feng and called him over to help with opening the entrance. They placed their whole body weights into the door and pushed at the count of 3. Much to everyone's surprise, opening the entrance let in copious amounts of snow and opened the lobby up to the frigidity of a raging snowstorm. The storm was too extreme, and none of them could take the cold. When you get close enough to the storm, even opening your eyes could become a possible injury. Han Feng regretted leaving his cozy couch to subject himself to manual labor and frostbite. If people went out in that weather, death wouldn't be far-fetched. Thankfully, the rest of the volunteers also came to the same realization. Only an idiot would try to go out in that temperature. Speaking of idiots, he was finally here. A voice that sounded all too familiar in Han Feng's ear. It was none other than Homeless Joe, also known as Brother Lee. He was roasting everyone for acting like cowards when they needed to be imposing at tough times like this. The volunteers shivered in their boots while trying to talk Brother Lee out of his stupidity. No one should go out in the harshness of that snowstorm. Brother Lee was built different, though. First, he finished the cigarette he was smoking in one puff. Pumped to go in like the madman that he was, Brother Lee plowed through the snow, trapping everyone in with his hands. The dumbass started chanting like an anime character while literally punching the snow, scattering the pile all over the place. He continued doing this for a while. He even managed to dig a Homeless Joe-sized hole in the middle of the human-length pile of snow. Then came the silence. After a few moments, all the volunteers could hear were garbled pleadings for help coming from under the snow pile. The others had to drag Homeless Joe out of the snow. His face looked purple from the cold and being trapped under the heavy snow. Volunteers finally decided that venturing outside was impossible and closed the gate. Han Feng ran up to Brother Lee, trying to make sure that the stupid gangster was all right. He asked everyone to go to the car park first so they could look for the person in charge of attendance. They could always decide what to do next when the snow stopped. With such a severe blizzard rampaging throughout the world, people were no longer in a situation where the problem could be solved with manpower. In the building's car park, it seemed like the atmosphere was a little more comfortable on account of it being underground. Mr. Jiang, the de facto leader, was surrounded by the owners as always. Upon receiving reports from the lobby, he concurred that the clearing operation should take a pause. Also, from now on, the basement car park will be the designated donation and collection point. Han Feng stayed low-key in the background. This was the first time he had met that guy with the surname Jiang from the group chat. This meant that this was the guy who had spearheaded the establishment of that eventual scam committee. With his kind and well-spoken demeanor, Mr. Jiang would manipulate everyone with politeness and the illusion of support and unity. Mr. Jiang commented about the overwhelming downpour of donations from so many owners. These generous donations would help those who were struggling, and for that, he was grateful. The general vibe in the car park was quite positive. People were feeling good about their selfless acts. It gave them a false sense of unity as they worked on the same goal of survival. Han Feng knew something they didn't, though. They just had to wait and see as the disaster continued to go on for an eternity. They would soon regret giving up their resources. Brother Lee, still shivering from the stunt he tried to pull earlier, decided to head up first and say goodbye to Han Feng. Looking around the car park, Han Feng noticed someone eye-catching. It was that airhead nurse that he had met in the hospital when he broke his leg. She was wearing some type of cute winter onesie while clumsily carrying a stack of boxes. She was clearly struggling to navigate her way through the crowd of people standing around the committee. Given her awkwardness, she eventually bumped into some of the guys standing around. She would have slipped straight to the floor if it hadn't been for Han Feng swooping in to save the day once again. While holding her in her box, he asked if the blushing nurse was okay. When she finally opened her eyes, she expressed her thanks for the save and eventually recognized Han Feng from the hospital. Then she remembered that his leg was supposed to be severely injured. He shouldn't be in the condition to catch falling maidens. Realizing that he acted before thinking about the current situation, Han Feng struggled to think of a way out. He stumbled over his words before getting out that his speed of recovery had always been great since he was young. It was very unconvincing with all the nervous gestures. Fortunately, the nurse was too dense to gather any kind of untruthfulness from his words and actions. She just found his recovery speed to be fantastic. Han Feng offered to help lift her boxes. She declined at first, saying that they were heavy, but our boy insisted. It took a little bit of convincing, but she eventually entrusted the boxes to him. As soon as he got both hands on the supplies, he was flabbergasted by how heavy they actually were. They were unnaturally weighty. Curious, he asked her what was inside. She explained that these were mainly medical supplies that she was donating to those in need. She also acknowledged that it might be a little too heavy, and that she would be fine carrying them to the donation point. Entranced by her beauty and kindness, you could give Han Feng a few more pounds to carry, and he would never complain. Since she claimed to be stronger than most guys, the nurse kept reminding him not to push too hard. When asked if she'd always been strong since she was young, she became a little guarded while answering that there was a reason behind it all. Hearing those cryptic words made Han Feng naturally curious, but she looked uncomfortable telling the story and apologized for bringing it up. It's just that something happened recently that she can't quite explain. Also, they'd been talking and walking for a while now, and she still didn't know his name. Han Feng politely introduced himself in turn. The angelic nurse also dropped her name, Jin Shui. Based on her big smile, it seemed like she really appreciated this unexpected meeting. He was speechless whenever he saw that smile. He would have been in, but Nurse Jin asked what he does, and he truthfully answered that he was unemployed. Talk about fumbling a baddie so close to the finish line, my boy. But thanks to manhwa logic, an impatient man just happened to pass by, knocking Nurse Jin off balance. Struggling to maintain her balance, she eventually fell on Han Feng. He was the only one she could grab to stabilize. This also led to her soft breasts pressing into Han Feng's arm all of a sudden. Having zero riz, Han Feng just stood there and savored the moment. Nurse Jin immediately pulled away and apologized while Han Feng tried to say that it was no problem. This would have been a perfect first meeting if it hadn't been for Li Hyona rearing her ugly head to approach Han Feng like a sleepless zombie. You could see the effects of hunger and cold taking a toll on her. Like the parasite that she is, the witch immediately pounced on Han Feng, deliberately rubbing her chest against his arm. Grabbing him slowly, she asked who the pink-haired lady was, and if she was a friend. Nurse Jin immediately felt awkward and grabbed the boxed supplies away from Han Feng's hands. She just wanted to get her donations logged and not interrupt two friends chatting. Han Feng asked why Hyona was down here while he regrettably watched Nurse Jin scurry her way to the donation point. The witch explained that she came to get some supplies, noting that she was worried about Han Feng, given his inactivity. He scratched his head and told her that he was just about to send a message. She called him a liar, seeing as he was happily chatting away with another lady just now. Then came the inquiries about whether he had any spare food supplies at home. She claimed that she was almost out of food and was wondering if she could share some of Han Feng's. He didn't get pissed off or anything like that. On the contrary, he smirked. Continuing his simp act, Han Feng claimed that he didn't have much food left either, but could spare some to share. But he'd only share food with people who reply to messages. Acting forward, he grabbed the witch by the waist and asked if she would be willing to accompany him to his place for a few days. Not used to the more confident version of her supposed simp, the witch lost her composure for a second. She pushed him away and smiled. Li Hyona insisted that if Han Feng wanted to chat, they could just do so online. Taking that as a flat-out rejection, Han Feng turned back to head up to his place. Being in a very desperate situation, the witch grabbed him before he could get far, telling him to wait up. She asserted that he had changed quite a bit recently. Hyona also claimed that she had always been very serious about her feelings. With the most convincing puppy eyes imaginable, Hyona professed that she didn't want people to think that she was just with Han Feng for his money. So, she's going to need a little more time for something more serious. Han Feng looked at her act with a blush on his face. Thankfully, he checked himself immediately. If he hadn't already died once by her hands, he would have believed those words. But right now he just wanted to tear her ugly mask off. The thing is, he still hadn't found out who the man behind the witch was. Thinking about it now, why would he even go look for the guy when he could just act and proceed like he did in his previous life until Hyona naturally brought the man over? This time he'll be more prepared. Sure, they have a steel bat, but Han Feng has a sniper rifle. Realizing this, he decided not to rock the boat too much and joked that he was just teasing her. Now, the witch was feeling a little ashamed of putting on another acting masterclass for a joke. Still, Han Feng asserted that he would wait for her message so he could deliver some food supplies the next day. With this, they finally bade each other goodbye. She even told him to hit her up if there was anything he wanted to talk about. As the witch exited the car park, an evil smile crept up at the corners of her vile mouth. Unbeknownst to her, Han Feng wasn't the one being played this time around. He really liked tormenting her on the low-key. 2 days passed without Han Feng contacting the witch. This turned into Li Hyona blowing up his phone with angry text messages about the delivery of the promised supplies. Han Feng was just letting all the salty messages pile in while he ate a piping hot steak meal paired with some fizzy drink. How good would it be to eat some good food while tormenting a witch who killed you in the previous life? Finally, figuring out the method to make some blissfully delicious meat was a game changer. The cold weather outside was perfect for such nice and warm food inside. While everyone was miserable in the cold, this guy was actually sweating it out in his bathrobe. Absolute Chad. He hadn't been just lounging around these past few days either. He conducted numerous experiments that allowed him to confirm 2 important things. First, his meat could not be expanded limitlessly. Second, just like soybeans, meat could be reproduced without a limit. His experiments had already yielded pounds and pounds of it. For every full stalk of beans sprouted, he would use half to grow more beans and eat the other half. He could freely apply the same principle to meat. Under the red and green light, half a steak and a handful of soybeans could produce a whole piece of steak. Exploiting the same process over and over would yield an unlimited amount of steak. After conducting numerous tests to put this hypothesis to the test, he concluded that he wouldn't have to worry about eating good food in the future. Some TV stations were still sending out reporters to chronicle the unprecedented snowstorm on its 19th day. It was August 2nd now, and even the picturesque islands of the Maldives near the equator had reached average temperatures of negative 42 degrees. The entire island had been engulfed by ice and snow. Even the ocean was freezing at a speed observable to the naked eye. It was unreal. According to expert readings, the ice layer had reached 55 centimeters deep. Similar situations could be observed in other countries near the equator, the supposed warm territories. Watching through his massive entertainment center, Han Feng scoffed at the news coverage. In reality, the situation in the outside world was far worse than the media's portrayal. He was peacefully sipping on his daily red wine when a sudden noise from outside sent a shock to his system. Han Feng hurriedly made his way to the window and opened the curtains. He could see a building engulfed in fire from a distance. This was the 7th explosion incident in the past few days. Even Han Feng was clueless about the cause. But what was certain was that this was not a good sign. There had been a ramp-up in the number of military helicopters flying through the city too. If he was clueless, so were the rest of the survivors. The situation outside was causing panic among the residents. All of them were basically camping around the basement car park to trade for goods and food supplies. Human greed knows no limits, so there were many residents taking advantage of others, leading to several conflicts and altercations. At the center of all this was Mr. Jiang, who was still playing the role of the reliable leader who provided necessary resources to the destitute for free. Today was a special day as Han Feng decided to go down to the basement car park with the other survivors. He'd only been out of his place for a few minutes, and the cold was already getting to him. Every time he exited the comfort of his home, he regretted his decision. The real reason he came down was to gather some useful information. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't have shown his face to these people ever again. Before he was given the chance to reset, he remembered a rebellion sweeping through the neighborhood. If memory served him right, it should be related to the people in this basement. Right now, they were still standing by their promise to give away resources instead of outright scamming people. To find out what was really going on, Han Feng decided to do some detective work on this messy and chaotic gathering. Based on the long lines in the collection area, it looked like the number of households facing shortages was relatively high. At the front of the line, a man was complaining about how few resources he was getting when he had donated several large boxes of supplies, while Mr. Jiang insisted that everyone was given an equal slice. With a single canned good and one sausage in hand, the man demanded his donated resources back. But the committee couldn't really do that. Since the disaster was ongoing, Mr. Jiang urged the man to look at the bigger picture and promised to pay back the man in cash several times over once things settled down. But a promise of money for an uncertain tomorrow wasn't worth anything right now. Finally, other people in the line started speaking up against the whiny man. They bashed the guy, telling him to stop being so shameless and move along. It didn't take too long for a mob to form around the idea of hating this shameless man who just wanted a few more supplies for his family. They were thoroughly under the influence of the interim committee. Han Feng knew all too well that there was no way for the people in charge to concede their resources in this current situation. But placing yourself on higher moral ground against those who donated more resources at the start of the crisis was equally shameless. Speaking of shameless, the man, the myth, the legend, finally made another appearance in the basement. It was none other than Homeless Joe. Brother Lee. He looked a lot worse than a few days ago. He looked frail, sickly, and thin. It had been a while since the Gun brothers had seen each other. Brother Lee claimed that he wasn't doing too badly, but it was clear that he was. According to him, he was just trembling from being flustered and powerless, not to mention the cold. He was far from doing not too bad. Brother Lee finally admitted that he had been having a difficult time, just depending on drinking water to suppress his hunger, as he didn't have any food left. When the donation drive was in full swing, he donated most of his resources to the committee. In the end, his own supply ran out before the promised end of the snowstorm. In addition, the rations that the committee doled out were too little. If Brother Lee had only known how bad the weather would be, he would have kept more of his personal stash. Realizing that he had a possible solution for Brother Lee's plight, Han Feng pulled the gangster closer to whisper a favor. Brother Lee pulled away in disbelief. Little Han Feng just offered him 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages to do a simple job. Han Feng made a point of asserting that this would put a significant dent in his supplies. The gangster took it as his little bro was looking for an excuse to give him food. He was moved to tears, promising to remember his goodwill for the rest of time. Brother Lee grabbed Han Feng with sincere intensity and assured him that this small matter would be settled without a fuss. As for the food, he could just swing by Han Feng's house later. But first, Brother Lee really needed something to fill his stomach, so he lined up to get some rations. Han Feng was just pleased with the perfect deal he cooked up. With just a few packs of noodles and sausages, he wouldn't have to come down here personally to gather information in the future. He felt a little sorry for Brother Lee, but sticking his nose into other people's business wasn't as important as comfortably lazing on his sofa, eating delicious food, and playing games. Han Feng would have had a perfect journey in the basement car park if he hadn't been spotted by yet another familiar face. After hearing his name, the next thing he saw was a palm heading for his face. Lee Hyona's version of hello for today was a crisp slap across Han Feng's cheek. Not expecting to get assaulted so early in the day, he didn't know how to react to this absurd scenario. With anger in her eyes, Hyuna told Han Feng that he had been a disappointment. The broke bitch proceeded to yell at him for not responding to her messages asking for food. She made sure to raise her voice so everyone in the car park could hear. Han Feng was stun-locked. He just stood there trying to process what was happening. The witch he had been messing with just slapped him across the face in front of everyone. He hadn't even settled her previous life debts yet. Now she's coming into his space and slapping him for no reason? This was blasphemous at this point. With his anger rising at an alarming rate, he reckoned that Lee Hyona still saw him as that pathetic wimp, easy to bully. He remained silent for a few moments as she berated him for not responding. She called him deaf and mute, and demanded an answer to her questions. Han Feng took a deep breath, the cold smoking up the air. Then he proceeded to put on another act, sincerely apologizing to Hyuna. He explained that his supplies were stolen. He had placed the food he was about to deliver outside his door for a quick second to get his keys, but the boxes of supplies were gone by the time he returned. Han Feng claimed that he tried to look for the culprit, but hadn't found any clues at all. At this point, she looked like a crackhead desperate for her next hit as she asked him if he still had some resources left tucked away. He answered that he didn't have much, only enough to last him a few days if rationed to 1 meal a day. Hearing that he still had some food left, Hyona's unhinged face lit up with a blushing smile. She was back to her sweet girl act, and the transition was flawless. But when she asked Han Feng to split half of his food and just eat 1 meal every 2 days so they could both get through the disaster together, she looked unhinged. Han Feng could barely stand how shameless this woman could be. To be capable of saying such selfish words without batting an eye was terrifying. Well, in her eyes, this man was still just a tool to use when needed and nothing more. Letting her continue thinking that way, Han Feng smiled and lovingly concurred with the plan. He acted like a man who would stand by his promises and split his supplies equally with some girl. She even demanded to get the food now, but he scheduled the delivery for the night, insisting that he had some packing to do. She teased him that she'd be waiting for the message tonight. Heading back first, Hyuna wished him well and hoped he wouldn't catch the flu going around. Han Feng bade her farewell as well, a sinister plan already brewing in his petty mind. As early as 8 in the evening, Lee Hyuna was already badgering Han Feng for the food. She grew so impatient that she even went to the lobby near his room at around 9:30. She was shivering in the halls, alone, cold, and miserable. Han Feng was back to his favorite hobby, hooking Hyuna with bait, then completely ghosting her with texts and calls. The elevator was busted after weeks of cold without maintenance, so if she really wanted to cause a scene, she'd have to take the stairs up to Han Feng's unit. Seeing no other choice, Lee Hyuna swallowed her pride and took the creepy staircase. Halfway through the climb, she was already exhausted, with the cold making her shiver. It was a hellish ordeal. If it weren't for the supplies, she wouldn't be doing all this. The exhaustion kept piling on as she had been starving for a few days now. Each step up the stairs took all the strength she had left. You've got to give it to her. There are very few people who would climb more than 16 floors just to leech off someone's food. Coincidentally, even the emergency lights on the higher floors were also busted. This just made her climb darker and spookier. Upon hearing what she perceived as some kind of eerie sound, Lee Hyuna anxiously asked who was there. To answer her inquiry, a black plastic bag came directly from the higher floors, on track to land on her pretty little head. Shocked and unable to move, Hyuna was forced to just stand there and wait for the black bag to hit her. As soon as the bag landed with a loud bang, the emergency lights kicked back on, and white dust filled the staircase. The always cheerful and smiling Lee Hyuna was blasted with flour all over her head and body. In front of her was Han Feng. He claimed that he fell asleep and immediately came running down with the supplies when he saw her messages. When the light turned off, he accidentally dropped the bag of flour, leading to this situation. Wiping off the flour and plastic from her hair and coat, Hyuna felt disgusting as hints of her real nasty personality peeked through the mask. Hanfeng was quite pleased with this sight. He had specially prepared this mean-spirited prank for her, and it wasn't done yet. He lifted another plastic bag, telling the witch that he packed up his remaining resources for her. Upon inspection, she noticed that most of the food and produce were already moldy. It looked more like trash than edible food. Playing the fool, Hanfeng scratched the back of his head and claimed that he worked extra hard to keep these leftovers in stock. There was even rotting meat mixed in there. Then he expertly pivoted to acting offended, grabbing the plastic bag and telling her to give it back if she didn't like it. Afraid of starving for another day, the witch hurriedly grabbed the bag away, claiming that she wanted it. Hanfeng looked at her carefully from head to toe. He scoffed at himself. In front of him was the so-called goddess he had been pursuing with all his might before. Right now she looked like a homeless crackhead stuck outside on a winter night. She was rummaging through the trash bag and trying to find something edible in the moldy pile. She even greedily grabbed the remaining bag of flour from Hanfeng's hand. Lee Hyuna was celebrating even half a bag of flour, not minding that she got blasted by the white stuff just minutes ago. She then took off without saying thank you or goodbye, but Hanfeng didn't mind. Giving her his literal garbage to eat should be enough to give the witch some stomach problems for a few days. Showering in this weather was also impossible, so she would have to walk around with all that flour sticking to her body for a while. As Hanfeng cheerfully headed back to his place, he started feeling something weird. He played it off as if he hadn't noticed, but there was something moving in the background. Keeping his wits about him, Hanfeng acted naturally, heading to his unit. He exited the stairwell and walked like everything was normal. A shadow of a figure followed his footsteps a few seconds later. It was definitely a person, judging from the snow boots they were wearing. Taking advantage of the surprise factor, Hanfeng actually hid behind the door and pounced on the unknown figure tailing him. He made sure to grab the mysterious person firmly and aggressively, taking them down to the ground. Just as he was about to punch the bastard trying to spy on him, something made Hanfeng pause, his hostility dying down. The one tailing him turned out to be a girl with messy hair, sleepy eyes, and ultra-thick glasses. What the hell is going on, bro? Hanfeng could think of only one reason why she could be here at this late hour. She must have been spying on him, and our hero wanted to find out her intentions. But all he got in response was silence and a blank stare from under her glasses. The girl was obviously not a chatty one. She didn't say a word, and Hanfeng, surprised by this behavior, decided to use more weighty arguments to make her talk. He threatened to take off her coat right here in the cold if she didn't talk. Even that wasn't enough to loosen her tongue. Hanfeng got tired of messing with her and decided to let her go this time. But next time, she might not be able to count on such favor if she spied on him. Now she had to stop her silent games and hurry to her home before she got cold. As our hero was about to leave, he suddenly felt someone grab his sleeve. This silent girl wasn't going to let him go so easily. Although Hanfeng didn't understand what she wanted from him, she, on the other hand, just stared at him and remained silent. Hanfeng told her to stop looking at him, and even threatened her to leave if she didn't tell him what she wanted. But instead of answering, she pointed at something with her hand, and pulled our hero with her. Even a laggard like Hanfeng realized he was being shown something. They came to her room. It was surprisingly warm and bright inside. Our hero was even speechless. Looking around, he noticed piles of boxes of supplies. Of course, some of them were empty and the room was full of trash. But the fact that this girl had so many supplies weeks after the apocalypse began was incredible. Had she also prepared in advance? Hanfeng directly asked her if she knew in advance that the ice apocalypse would begin, and surprisingly enough, she finally spoke. Although she said some strange things, it turned out that she had done the calculations herself and got the result that predicted a future ice age. She turned out to be the strange person who had been posting in the community chat about the coming of the ice age apocalypse before it happened. Hanfeng, of course, didn't understand what she was talking about. It was hard for such a dumbass to realize that by doing research and calculations, one could sometimes know the future without even being a reborn regressor. But Hanfeng knew that she probably didn't bring him here to talk about her research. And he was right. She had clearly shown him the real reason. The girl had a lot of screens in her room with CCTV footage on them, and on all of them was our hero. On the first footage, he was picking his nose while carrying a pile of boxes in an elevator. On the second, a delivery service was bringing a dozen gas cans into his room. On the third, Brother Lee brought him a gun case, and so on. It turns out that Hanfeng's first guess about this girl upon meeting her turned out to be correct. She had indeed been spying on him, and for a long time. She was now more comfortable than ever and didn't hesitate to change her clothes right in front of our hero. Her room was too warm to wear warm winter clothes. Hanfeng still managed to blunder and misunderstood and asked why she suddenly decided to undress here. She simply replied that it was hot in here, but of course he meant something else. Why was she doing it here in front of him? He demanded that she should stop immediately and put her pants back on. Eventually, after a while, as much as he was against it, he had to take off his coat too. This girl had dangerous information, and until he resolved this issue, he just couldn't leave. So, summarizing what he understood, Han Feng realized that she was spying on him due to being suspicious of his behavior when he started stocking up on supplies before it even snowed. Fortunately, this monitoring wasn't for the purpose of gathering information on our hero for blackmail, but to find out if Han Feng was smart and capable enough to cooperate. Now it was just a matter of figuring out what she meant by cooperation. Talking was difficult for her, so the girl decided it was better to show. Along the way, of course, making our hero understand everything in his own way. Han Feng couldn't even imagine what she was going to do by making such movements. Of course, pulling out the generator from behind the bed, instead of what you think she was going to do. She just wanted Han Feng to teach her how to use the generator. She was a master of all things computers and books, but the everyday skills necessary for survival were critically lacking. After a while, the generator was up and running steadily. We'll leave out the fact that running a generator in a room is a very bad idea. Let's assume that this generator was hydrogen-powered and was fairly quiet. Han Feng hoped that this would be the end of her requests, but that wasn't the case. Her blue eyes were asking for help again. This time with the hot water boiler. Our hero quickly set it up, and now she should have hot water around the clock thanks to the generator's power. But still, Han Feng advised her to save water and remember to close the tap. Next, she asked for help with the refrigerator. It was an unimaginable mess, and our hero had to teach her that raw meat should be put in the freezer, not in the refrigerator. Otherwise, it will quickly spoil. Also, she had to keep everything clean or she would soon get sick. And he wasn't going to do all this for her, she had to do it herself. Han Feng couldn't understand how she had lived to this point without knowing such basic things. He even had to show her how to change and connect the gas cans to the stove. She had to remember the safety precautions and clearly repeat all his actions. It only got more complicated from there. Han Feng had to teach her how to cook and roast food on the fire. Finally, when our hero was completely exhausted, a delicious dinner was ready, and he advised her to eat while the food was still hot. He himself couldn't understand how he'd gotten to this life. He had to spend all day babysitting an adult child. His new friend's ability to take care of herself was too low. Although she didn't seem to be embarrassed at all, the dinner was just too delicious. Han Feng realized that there was no understanding on this matter and awkwardly excused himself by saying that he was just joking. He was incredibly tired for the day and couldn't dream of anything else but his warm bed. Turns out he wasn't the only one tired during the day. When he turned his attention to the girl, she was already asleep, and the table with food as a bed suited her just fine. This was the first time Han Feng had ever seen someone fall asleep while eating. But still, he decided to carry her to the bed. Who would have thought that he would spend the day teaching a child? During the night, the snowfall only intensified and the temperature dropped even lower. Han Feng had just woken up, and he already had guests demanding his attention. It was the same girl again. She had brought gifts to thank him for his help. Even our hero was surprised by her generosity. She had brought so much. But after Han Feng took the boxes away, she continued to stand at the door and wasn't going to leave at all. That look he already knew. She wanted to ask for another favor. She had brought a generator with her and asked him to teach her one more time. She didn't seem to have memorized yesterday's lessons, so Han Feng had to start all over again. After a few days of talking to the girl, he realized that she was a complete idiot when it came to survival. She was also critically lacking in common sense and understanding of what was appropriate and what was not. But she didn't give up, and every day she dragged Han Feng to her room to be taught survival and everyday skills. After a while, she finally managed to cook something remotely edible and resembling a meal. Even such a cooking skill Han Feng considered an improvement. Previously, even dogs wouldn't want to eat such a thing. But in an ice apocalypse, even humans would line up for such food. After so long, Han Feng finally decided to find out the girl's name. She introduced herself as Zhao Xingan. It was still a mystery to Han Feng why she spoke so strangely and what was wrong with her. But he wasn't going to leave her to her fate. Meanwhile, downstairs in the basement where supplies were being distributed to the needy residents, things were not calm at all. The hungry residents were fighting amongst themselves for what little supplies they had left. Chaos reigned, and the residents began taking supplies from each other, arguing that no one could prove whose supplies it was. The weak simply fell from powerlessness, and the strong tried to grab more. It seems that the quiet days in this community are over. People were fighting for resources they felt entitled to. They guarded what little they managed to loot with their lives. Any attempt at stealing quickly devolved into mindless violence. These people punched and kicked one another mercilessly until their fists and shoes were bloodied. While everyone was hastening the collapse of civilization, Mr. Jiang remained calm throughout the storm. He amplified the volume of the megaphone in his hands and stopped the fighting altogether as everyone covered their ears in pain. Bro was using a real sonic attack. That's a real supervillain. After a few seconds of that grating feedback sound, Mr. Jiang finally addressed his fellow survivors. He asked them if they had had enough of the fighting. He picked up one of the badly beaten men and explained that just because of these few remaining resources, they were risking death. Wasn't that the definition of ridiculous? But the masses were still angry. Mr. Jiang was the one who suggested the donation system, and now they only received a packet of noodles every few days. If they didn't die fighting, they would die starving. Mr. Jiang pretended as though he was listening to their complaints about the problem with resource distribution or the lack thereof. He turned to his people and stood on business. If they were fighting for such ridiculous reasons, then perhaps they deserved to starve to death. Mr. Jiang posed the question of who caused this situation in the first place, and urged them to think carefully. The irritated masses blamed him for this. He picked up a piece of bread and started working his magic as he helped the people remember what was really happening. Bread that was originally sold for a few dollars could now be bought from those with abundant resources for tens or even hundreds of dollars. The elite squeezed the unfortunate dry. It came to the point of splitting a piece of bread into 5 or 10 pieces to be auctioned. They used the disaster to get rich. As for those down in the dumps in the basement car park, they had long since run out of cash and resources. But here they were, having an internal strife due to the system that used to work. They were killing one another while the elites, who had plenty of supplies, hoarded their treasures without donating to the common good. They were the ones who raised the prices with malice. And yet here were the poor, starving and fighting to the death. Mr. Jiang asked if that was fair. Feeling that he now had the masses gobbling up his words, Mr. Jiang urged everyone to stop what they were doing and stand united to take back the resources that belonged to everyone. These hungry and angry citizens started rationalizing what they had just heard, convinced that they were being treated unfairly. Why were the rich the only ones getting all the benefits while the rest of them had to struggle just to stave off starvation and death? Mr. Jiang watched as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place on their own after planting a seed of hatred in the people's minds. The dissatisfaction and anger that the masses felt pointed upwards to the rest of the apartment building's residents. The survivors believed that they were just taking the share that belonged to them. Seeing the bubbling of violence, chaos, and desperation, Mr. Jiang smirked silently. In the midst of the mounting chaos, Homeless Joe, also known as Brother Lee, could be seen. Of all the people, he was the only one who could see through the bullshit of that speech. The people had practically gone mad, and something big was about to happen. He had to inform Han Feng as soon as possible. In Han Feng's room, he was just lounging around, pretending to read a book while snoring. He was woken up by the ringtone of his phone. He received Brother Lee's texts about the trouble brewing up in the basement car park. With Mr. Jiang's continuous incitement, the people were now planning to snatch resources from everyone else. They were going door to door and prying locks open. These raiders were armed and ready to cause harm. Brother Lee advised Han Feng to hide and not face these lunatics head-on. He could only hope that Homeless Joe could take care of himself out there. Han Feng did not expect things to turn out like this. Although he bought 2 guns in case of a crisis, the idea of using them against another human mortified him a little. Furthermore, if the people had formed such an organized operation and revealed his resources, they would certainly have been gunning for him crazily. They would eat him up and leave nothing but bones. And for that, he needed to be prepared for all kinds of scenarios. For now, he retrieved a bunch of wires, tools, and a couple of fire extinguishers from the stockroom. Using this stuff, he tried to rig his door by crudely strapping live wires on the doorknob for security reasons. Upon finishing his janky rig, Han Feng slowly unfurled the wire on the floor. His little experiment was interrupted by the sudden loss of power, though. From above, it was clear that every building in the area had lost power at the same time. Some people tried to contact management, but they lost contact with those people long ago. Han Feng reckoned that with the snowstorm intensifying and the overloaded usage of power by people trying to keep warm, this blackout would have happened sooner or later. Moreover, the snow built up in most areas, and the abysmal temperatures outside made it impossible for maintenance. Considering all the factors at hand, the power failure and signal loss might be permanent this time around. Once the people realized that the power was never coming back, things would only go downhill from there. Their feelings of panic would only lead to an even more serious rebellion movement. And that's when the real hell would begin. 30 minutes before the power went out, the witch, Lee Hyona, was greedily shoving noodles down her gullet. Her current benefactor was bragging about how he bought resources at 50 times the market price some time ago, and those poor people could not resist as they shut their mouths and sold. For all the resources he had in stock, he only spent $500,000. He also started the practice of auctioning supplies, letting the poor fight just to get a crumb from him. Using this tactic, Blondie earned quite a lot. He ran his hand alongside Lee Hyona's face and asked if she thought she had made the right decision to follow him. The witch smiled and cheerfully nodded. The rich prick was already thinking of doing anything he wanted with this pretty girl, as long as he had the resources to buy her obedience. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps pouring into the hallway. It was the car park people, and they brought tools to break doors open in the middle of the night. Blondie overheard that he was being specifically targeted for spearheading the rise of prices in the group chat. The raiders started banging and kicking his door, trying to force it open. Blondie might be rich, but could all that cash save him from what was coming? He stood there, unsure of what to do as the people continuously tried to break in. Finally, the crazed cult of Mr. Jiang's hungry soldiers had gone full tilt. The snowstorm continued to rage on, not showing any signs of stopping anytime soon. Inside Han Feng's stronghold, the mess had accumulated as wires and supplies littered the ground. He was still working on his Home Alone-style trap on the door, causing a lot of mess. Han Feng did everything he was supposed to do to rig the door, but the energy reading indicated that there was no power going through. Just as he was wondering what went wrong, the hurriedly tied-together bunch of wires exploded and burned. The line must have become live right then and there. Caught in the blast, Han Feng coughed and tried to recover. He extinguished the fire on the wire. He still could not figure out what he was doing wrong and what was making the process so difficult. If the internet were still working, this would not be a problem at all. Unfortunately, someone started knocking on his door without him getting his door trap up in time. Han Feng stood up and carefully looked through the peephole to confirm who was on the other side of the door. He could not see a face, but he saw someone with a very short stature and hair sticking out. It was that outcast girl again. This time, she came over with her signature nonchalant face while asking for help. This was not a good time for Han Feng, as he was busy trying to improvise some traps inside. But then he remembered the incident that sent him back to the past, when he was seduced by a witch and clobbered by a madman. He released his grasp from the door handle, fearing what might be lurking on the other side. Han Feng warned the girl that people were breaking down doors and robbing supplies. Instead of letting her in, he just told her to return home quickly, as he wouldn't open the door for her. Outcast girl stood in the gloomy, cold hallway. Silence filled the air. Then she started banging on the door even harder and louder. When Han Feng still refused to let her in, she chose to sit and shiver at the entryway's floor. The cold was getting to her, and the voices of the raiders were starting to grow louder as they reached Han Feng's floor. They did not care how many residents lived on the 18th floor. They just came here to break every door open. Two rough-looking men surveyed the 18th floor hallway and celebrated the fact that they were the first ones to arrive. They immediately divided up the rooms to ransack. Coincidentally, Han Feng's room was the nearest one. One of the raiders took a crowbar to start working on the door. They introduced themselves as people who delivered resources first to see if anyone was home. Inside, Han Feng had taken the girl and covered her mouth to prevent any noise. When the raiders did not hear any response from the inside, they proceeded to try and force their way into the room using a single crowbar. Han Feng quietly assured the outcast girl that those bastards wouldn't be able to make a dent in his reinforced door. Hearing his reassuring words, she visibly calmed down. The door handle flipped up and down multiple times, but the raiders could not figure out a way in. With the sturdy door getting them nowhere, the raiders decided to mark Han Feng's place and proceed to the next door first. It was a good thing that the reinforced door and handle were installed. With 5-centimeter thick iron plates reinforcing the frame, even the contractor who installed it was shocked. Han Feng was so busy feeling good about his decisions that he forgot to let go of the girl's mouth. He was too afraid to make a noise and attract attention. Still, Outcast Girl thanked him for taking her in before the raiders saw her sitting outside. They opted to wait a few more minutes just to be sure, but it sounded like those raiders were gone now. Han Feng immediately got back to fixing his trap. If he could do this right, those who dared to touch his door again would get electrocuted to death. The girl curiously asked what he was doing, and he introduced it as his electrocution defense measure. He even condescendingly told her that she wouldn't understand even if he explained. Well, he didn't even understand the thing himself, and installing this electrocution device was proving impossible. Little did he know, she was an expert when it came to anti-theft devices and voltage differences. These were very simple concepts for her. So, Outcast Girl coached Han Feng from the side, instructing him to cut the power supply while wrapping the bare wire around the door handle carefully. From there, they connected the next wire from the circuit box to the handle and, for the finale, turned on the power supply. When he measured the live current in the handle, the tester indicated a high level of electricity. When asked how she knew about this complicated stuff, she answered that the true eye of the evil king possessed the ability to see the truth of everything in the world. Since his trap was done with the help of Outcast Girl, he asked what she needed help with. She did not bother telling a story or anything like that. She just emptied out the contents of her backpack on the couch, ignoring Han Feng. Then, the girl boldly declared that the true eye of the evil king would be staying in this place from now on. It took Han Feng a second to process what he had just heard. He was obviously very opposed to having this girl living in his private space, and desperately urged her to go back to her house quickly. Han Feng was so flustered by the idea that he tripped on the wires coiled around the floor, his body launching forward. After wobbling for a few seconds, he fell on the solid ground, making a mess in the process. On his hands was a bright purple color emanating a bizarre energy. Tripping on his feet and falling on the ground should have hurt quite a lot. But it didn't. That was when he noticed where he fell. His coffee table, which was solid just a second ago, had turned into some sort of moldable and clay-like form. Could it be that he unconsciously made the coffee table turn soft? Han Feng finally noticed the purple light dancing around his hands and immediately connected it to the bizarre soft property of the table. Even the toolbox and the tools nearby had turned wonky upon being touched by the light. He grabbed a hammer, and the metal head bent on itself. Han Feng waved the hammer around, and it started losing its shape. In simple terms, the purple light could cause items to turn soft somehow. Outcast Girl witnessed this bizarre incident with her own two eyes and did not make a peep. She was so quiet that he forgot there was someone else in the room, and got too carried away figuring out his new ability. Outcast Girl just looked at him with the same blank stare. Then she lit up and labeled him as an emissary chosen by the true eye of the evil king. Whatever that might mean. Han Feng chose to play along, assuming the role of a subordinate selected by the evil king instead of revealing his power. This girl's thinking seemed peculiar, so he might get away with it. As fellow emissaries, she proposed that they help each other, meaning Han Feng's apartment, where he rested, should be shared. Just as he was about to outrightly reject her again, Outcast Girl was already heading toward one of the rooms as if she owned it. He hadn't even agreed to the proposal yet, and that lady already thought they were building a lair for the evil king. It wasn't too big of a problem, so he just let her be. What was more important right now was to figure out what exactly that purple light was. At a cursory glance, it seemed to have the ability to turn things soft, which meant he possessed more than just two kinds of lights. Maybe there were many more that he just hadn't discovered yet. The inciting incident was him tripping over the cables and almost crashing into the coffee table that had turned soft. It would be logical to try to recreate the feeling of that moment to reproduce the power. After concentrating on that image for a while, Han Feng managed to summon the purple lights again. He was getting the hang of calling his powers automatically now. The first thing he tried it out on was the cables that triggered the discovery in the first place. Then, he branched out to other things, namely, a sharp kitchen knife. Curious, he activated the purple light, and its grimy essence quickly swallowed the whole blade. He was shocked to see that the softening effect had no problem working on steel as well. It got so soft that the once sharp knife felt like jelly wrapping around his skin. After that, he went on a spree and tried this softening touch on many other materials too. Every household material he could think of was susceptible to the power. The longer he used the purple light, the softer they became. Other than altering an object's softness, there were no other changes. By itself, the purple light's effect was pretty useless and impractical. Then, another idea struck Han Feng, a concept that he was already familiar with. What if he combined two different kinds of light? What if he mixed purple and green and applied them to a softened object at the same time? It did not take him long to get good at merging two lights into one. He grabbed the softened and melted-looking kitchen knife, applied purple and green lights all over it, and screamed, "Bankai," as if he was from Bleach. Much to his surprise, it really worked. The melted and softened kitchen knife returned to its solid state, tough and sharp as ever. Hell, he could even use the blade as a mirror, considering how polished it looked after applying the combined lights. He surveyed the room and found a box of tissues lying around. Curious, Han Feng did the same thing to a piece of tissue paper and tried to bend it out of shape. He had a very hard time doing so, which meant that he could change the toughness of an item when two different lights were combined. Moreover, the toughness that green and purple lights imbued in these objects was quite extreme. Speaking of toughness, doesn't he have a very important and practical use for this ability? Meanwhile, the owners who had raided other people's supplies were starting to act selfishly as they refused to hand over the resources they stole, choosing to keep them for themselves in fear of running out. They argued that they didn't want to split their hard-earned haul with the women and elderly, but they still had to keep it a secret, or they could get screwed if it leaked. While the raiders were plotting their shameless crime, one of them noticed something odd happening on the walls. Much to their disbelief, the wall of the 18th floor appeared to be wriggling around. Shining a light on its surface, a face started emerging from the supposedly solid concrete wall. It moved and grimaced as if it were trying to break free of the wall's clutches. The raiders might be tough criminals when they pillaged for resources, but this was something unexplainable and downright horrifying. As soon as the face's arms joined in, as though it were a ghostly apparition trying to break through the mortal realm, it was lights out. Anyone would have thought that they were witnessing paranormal activity in real life. The raiders hurriedly ran back to the floor below, afraid of what the 18th floor might have in store for them. Meanwhile, Han Feng was struggling as breathing while stretching the soft walls with his face was quite a hard thing to do. He had to get out of that soft and clay-like mess before he ran out of oxygen for the sake of experimentation. He picked one of his walls as a testing ground for his combined purple and green light powers, but applying these lights to an entire wall was too strenuous. After a while, he managed to get enormous amounts of light to join and blend with one another. It was an extremely exhausting process, but it gave him an even tougher and sturdier wall than he already had. To test it out, he brought out a sledgehammer for verification. He stood in front of the enhanced wall and lifted the sledgehammer up, determined to check if he had succeeded. With a look of anticipation, he began. Han Feng swung the hammer as hard as he could, and it made solid contact with the wall's surface. He did this multiple times, so many times that he could barely hold the heavy sledgehammer properly. Nevertheless, the exhaustion was worth it, as his enhanced wall proved to be extremely tough. He couldn't even scrape its surface with all his strength. Back in the basement car park, most of the raiders had come back to surrender a few bags of their loot. One man scratched his head as he apologized for only managing to seize a little bit of food while being audited. He seemed on edge, and when someone tapped him on the shoulder, his nerves flared. The guy who tapped him on the shoulder proceeded to take him down to the floor, securing his arms behind his back. This concerned citizen was one of the Jin brothers. He pressed down hard and demanded to know where the rest of the stolen food was hidden. The raider denied hiding the supplies, but Jin Bro clearly saw him carrying 3 big bags before surrendering just one little bag. Even with his arms getting twisted up, he continued to vehemently deny hiding resources. Since it looked like he was not willing to speak with just a little arm twist, Perhaps a good beating would squeeze some honesty out of the man. Just as Jin Bro was about to wail at the dishonest raider, someone calmly stopped him with a simple shoulder tap. Much to everyone's surprise, it was the man of the people, Mr. Jiang. Mr. Jiang urged the young man to let the raider go first so they could talk things out if there really was a problem. He heard the case of secretly hiding food that was supposed to be for everyone and wanted to deal with the matter in his own way. Jin Bro finally relented and threw the piece of trash down the ground for Mr. Jiang's sake. When the raider looked up, he saw a helping hand offering its assistance. It belonged to the representative of the basement car park, the benevolent Mr. Jiang. His smile gave the people peace and calm, but there was always something sinister behind that kind face. After a few minutes of talking and convincing, the man finally brought out the rest of the food that he pillaged. Just as previously said, there were 2 more big bags unaccounted for. The man shamefully apologized for being greedy, as he had 5 mouths to feed at home, and the food that was distributed was not nearly enough. Hearing this, Mr. Jiang took his share of today's ration and selflessly handed it over to the man. He respected the rules. People must hand over the things collected to receive rations according to the number of people in a household. But he could sympathize and understand those who were having a hard time living like that. The kind gesture almost made the dishonest raider cry right then and there, as he thanked Mr. Jiang from the bottom of his heart. The lying thief, Lao Wang, swore that if Mr. Jiang needed anything in the future, he would be at his service. Turning to the masses lined up in a single file, Mr. Jiang urged them to quickly receive their rations and go back home quickly. The Jin brothers were curious as to how Mr. Jiang got the thief to hand over everything so willingly, and why he gave the guy extra rations from his own share. He insisted that he did not do much and just helped the guy understand a certain principle. Of course, the Jin brothers were curious about this principle. Mr. Jiang explained that in the history of the country, there were multiple times when riots and rebellions occurred due to the clash of benefits between different social classes. However, the nature of these riots was defined as a collective social behavior. If you were not arrested on the spot, you wouldn't be convicted in a court of law. All Mr. Jiang did was inform the man that if he broke the rules, the collective would no longer welcome him. He would become nothing but a common robbing criminal, not to mention the punishment of the law after the disaster passes. That guy would have to face the revenge of the owners he stole from. Those fears compounded and made the decision easy. Uncle Lu watched everything unfold from afar, just a passive observer. He knew that Mr. Jiang deliberately left the fact that within those groups of rioters, there would always be a leader leading the collective's actions. Heroes and even villains will always emerge in troubled times, and he could see that potential in this Jiang kid. As for our MC, he was still busy swinging his sledgehammer on different parts of his house to make sure that they were virtually indestructible. This activity was draining him quite a lot, but at least he has invincible windows now. Now that the entire house has been strengthened and toughness verification is also finished, he can finally chill, right? At that moment, someone started knocking on his door again. This is becoming more and more common. He treated softly on the floor and wondered if it was those resource-stealing neighbors again. Upon arriving at the entryway, he looked through the peephole to see what was up. Much to his surprise, it was none other than Lee Hyuna calling out his name with tears in her eyes while shivering in the cold. This was an extremely familiar scene. She went on about how she couldn't betray the feelings he had towards her. That one can only understand someone's heart during tough times, and only someone who truly loved her would invest in her unconditionally. If he just opened the door, she would gladly open her heart. Han Feng's mind replayed the night he died after being ambushed in his own room. He recalled how this witch and his partner made a dead fool of him. Today this girl was repeating the exact same words she said to him before he died. This means that outside that door, there's a man lying in wait to bash his head in if he fell for the act. Han Feng's first thought, now that his revenge can finally be put into action, was to get the gun and kill this dog couple directly. But he stopped halfway through. Since there was no electricity right now, the enemy hiding in the dark would have the advantage while he was out in the open. If Han Feng can't kill in one shot, then he might lose his life instead. If he used electric shocks, then tricking 2 people into touching a trap at the same time would be basically impossible. For now, he tried his best to calm down as he turned his generators off. He had one shot at this, and that's even more reason for him not to lose his focus. He needed to calmly analyze the situation. The one posing a higher threat wasn't the witch at the front door, but the man hidden in the dark. Han Feng needs to locate his position and deliver a fatal blow upon stepping out. That first part could be a little tricky though. But he had prior knowledge of how this event happened in the past. As far as he could remember, that man should be hiding in the blind spot behind the door. He estimated the approximate position of his killer through the wall while clutching the sledgehammer tightly. Han Feng had an idea. Although he would need to spend some time to act it out, it could be his best shot. Touching the surface of the wall, purple lights coalesced in his hand as he hoped that this plan would work. Lee Hyuna continued acting like a damsel in distress as she desperately called Han Feng's name to be saved. The man she brought to kill and rob Han Feng was already beginning to change his mind. But she insisted that this loser, Han Feng, had a ton of resources. Truckloads of supplies delivered a day before the disaster. Anyone would jump on the chance to plunder enough resources to feed themselves for quite a few days. But they made the mistake of choosing the wrong superpowered target. The wall behind the killer morphed and moved like clay. A sledgehammer-shaped protrusion came out, seemingly trying to break through the soft wall. The killer was starting to hear some weird noises nearby, but Lee Hyona was too focused on performing the scam. When the killer identified that the noise was coming from behind, he was too late to turn around. A freaking sledgehammer coated with a softened cement wall collided with his jaw, undoubtedly breaking the whole thing with destructive force. The witch stood back in shock as she watched her partner in crime fly like a rag doll. She asked what happened, but he was in no shape to talk. His body was shivering with agony and cold. It was right then that the seemingly unopenable door slowly creaked open. Han Feng burst out of his room with a fire extinguisher in his hand and a sly little smile on his face. The haggard witch looked at the supposed loser in fear. Before she could even speak another word, Han Feng let that fire extinguisher rip, covering the thought with that white stuff as she screamed in pain. Lee Hyona was a good actress. She managed to keep her soft cadence as she begged Han Feng to stop spraying her with the white substance. She even ingested some of it, which you weren't supposed to do. The witch coughed and coughed as her body began breaking down from the cold brought on by the extinguishing agent. When she opened her eyes, she saw the rich blonde prick she had brought as muscle to rob Han Feng lying on the floor, convulsing uncontrollably and desperately asking for help. Unfortunately for him, Lee Hyona wasn't in the best position to provide assistance either. Han Feng's hand emerged from the extinguishing agent fog as he reached for the witch. She reacted quickly, but he managed to grab her hair and scarf simultaneously. It must have been the adrenaline pumping through her system, but Lee Hyona managed to break free, though she lost a handful of hair in the process. She was one slippery son of a gun. She managed to stand and run out of the way while screaming for help. Han Feng clicked his tongue as the witch escaped far too quickly. The same couldn't be said for the man he had clocked with a sledgehammer, though. He was still struggling to even stand. Fueled by anger and frustration, Han Feng kicked the rich prick in the stomach. Just as he was about to stomp on the man who had killed him in his past life, the blonde prick pleaded for him to wait just a second. This fool started bringing up his dad's name and all that nonsense. He promised that if Han Feng touched him again, bad things would happen. Han Feng responded by delivering another solid punch to the face, goading the spoiled brat about what he was going to do next. Han Feng didn't give a damn who this prick's daddy was. He intended to inflict as much pain as possible and beat the hell out of this brat to his heart's content. Seeing that threats wouldn't work, Blondie tried a more respectful approach. He called Han Feng a brother, asserting that they didn't even have beef with each other, so the beating was totally unjustified. Infuriated by memories of his past life, Han Feng punched the bastard's head to the ground once more. Han Feng mounted his chest and continued raining blows while voicing everything in his heart. This man had treated his life as if it were worthless. He was killed when he was just minding his own business. With his gloves painted with blood and his eyes filled with malice, Han Feng urged the prick to say something. Blondie might have wanted to, but his jaws and mouth were too messed up to form another sentence. Han Feng stood up and grabbed the modified baseball bat lying on the floor. Holding the weapon that had ended his life and started a new one, he looked at the defenseless culprit lying helpless on the ground. The rich prick cried and coughed up blood as he demanded to know why he was being treated this way. Han Feng's temper flared. The man who had killed him without any valid reason now dared to demand one from him. He raised the steel bat, customized with nails, and swung it down on Blondie's face with full force. The sound of skull cracking and blood splattering filled the hallway of the 18th floor. He had finally gotten his revenge. He had killed the man who killed him. Han Feng's blood was pumping, his adrenaline was spent, and he looked at the gruesome sight before him. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, he almost threw up at the gory mess. Luckily, he managed to turn his head to the side and vomit on the ground. Han Feng tried his best to recover his composure when a familiar voice cleared her throat. He turned around and saw Outcast Girl sitting by the door, quietly playing with the man's blood. She must have seen everything transpire and offered to help him with the mess. They took care of the crime scene quickly. She wasn't even fazed by the gore and blood. Han Feng reckoned there was something off about this girl, and it wasn't a good idea to let her stay in his place. He used the excuse of being targeted by more criminals seeking revenge at any moment to convince her to go back home lest she get caught in the crossfire. Sipping her orange juice, she didn't seem bothered by the threat of more intruders at all. Han Feng just really wanted to get her out of there for her own good. But she was adamant about staying in the apartment, and it seemed like nothing could convince her otherwise. He emphasized that the following days would be dangerous, and both of them could die in the process. She resolutely placed her glass of orange juice on the table as if making a stand. Outcast Girl assured him that the evil king's true eye would protect them no matter what. But for now, the evil king's power is depleted, and she needs some sleep. Han Feng was done with this shtick, so he grabbed her arm before she could lock herself in the room. He demanded she stop trying to brush him off with her wannabe edgy nonsense and listen as they were about to face something very serious. She simply glanced at his tight grip on her shoulder, then looked up. She told him to go on and opened the door to the room. Confused, Han Feng chose to follow her lead and peeked through the door. I don't know what he saw, but it shocked him to his core. Han Feng was speechless. Meanwhile, the basement parking lot was bustling with activity. Some people were loitering around, blocking the way for others who hadn't received their rations yet. Nevertheless, the system worked once more. They were still short on supplies to accommodate everyone, but it seemed peaceful for the most part. Lee Hyona, who had just escaped Han Feng's grasp, lined up with the plebeians to get her share now that she had nowhere else to go and no one to suck up to. She stated her name and apartment number and was given a piece of bread. The witch was still bitter about how everything had gone down the night before. Her wealthy sugar daddy hadn't returned after inexplicably collapsing so suddenly. The only logical explanation was that Han Feng had set a trap in advance, but that only made her more curious about what he had hidden behind that door. Before the commotion, she had seen a light flicker and felt a warm breeze coming from inside. That meant he had some kind of power source. Maybe he hadn't just stockpiled supplies. Maybe he had been prepared for the whole snowstorm in advance. All she felt was bitterness. The sneaky bastard hadn't said a word to her about this impending disaster. He enjoyed the good stuff while she accepted his trash. She wanted to find a way to get a closer look inside Han Feng's place. While she was busy daydreaming and seething, she bumped into another man lined up for rations. The man recognized her, and a mysterious bright light flared right in Lee Hyona's direction. The man with the flashlight cheerfully invited Lee Hyona to Block 5's lobby, where some survivors lit a brazier for warmth. Not interested, she insisted on keeping herself warm at home. But the man was being way too pushy. He bragged about how much food he had, alleging that he had enough food for a few days if shared by two at his house. The creep had always liked girls with her style, so this was his chance to score. Lee Hyona might be an insufferable witch, but even she felt her skin crawl at the creep's proposal. Seeing as his attempts to lure her with supplies failed, the creep started making a scene, accusing her of falsely claiming resources for other households. Which was true. Hearing the commotion, the other survivors were starting to pay attention. Lee Hyona shoved the creep out of the way, slapping him with the food she had just scammed. Humiliated in front of everyone, the creep raised his hand, motioning to bash her with his flashlight. Before he could assault the witch, Nurse Jin intervened. She slapped the creep with so much force it sent the bastard flying to a nearby wall. Seeing how the situation had escalated, the other survivors opted to call their almighty Mr. Jiang to handle the situation. Lee Hyona was stunned by the nurse's strength. In case she's injured or feeling unwell, the angelic nurse handed her a name card and an invitation for a checkup. Not wanting to draw any more attention, Hyona thanked Nurse Jin and tried to get out of there as fast as possible. But the creep was persistent. He stood back up, charged at Nurse Jin, and pinned her to the ground while calling perhaps the kindest person in the building a stinky hoe. Just when he was about to wail on her, someone grabbed the creep off the nurse with a forceful yank. With one swift motion, our favorite gangster, Brother Lee, neutralized the raging creep. His lips might be chapped, and he might be severely malnourished, but Brother Lee cannot stand men who hit women. Finally, Mr. Jiang arrived to defuse the commotion. The creep started pointing fingers at Hyona, snitching about her falsely claiming resources and hanging out with the rich kid, inflating supply prices. Seeing as the bastard hadn't learned his lesson yet, Brother Lee jumped him once more. But before he could get to the creep, Mr. Jiang grabbed the snitching creep by the collar, lecturing him about the committee's purpose. They are supposed to protect the weak and make sure that everyone has something to eat. In the end, all the creep got was a stern warning for his offense. Mr. Jiang approached Nurse Jin and Brother Lee, apologizing and inviting the two to the committee. Brother Lee passed. He is not interested in robbing others in the name of the committee. He would rather starve to death than compromise his principles. Likewise, Nurse Jin declined, albeit more politely. She can't just accept the committee's forceful methods, but she would be glad to help the sick. While the two made their way out of the car park, Hyona interjected and asked Mr. Jiang if she could join the group. The witch clung to Mr. Jiang's arm. As shitty as she looked, she tried to use her diminished feminine charms to latch onto someone with power. Being the Sigma that he is, Mr. Jiang clarified that they only accept people who can offer valuable skills. Brother Lee is a fighter, and Nurse Jin can treat the sick. A hoe like Lee Hyona is useless in the apocalypse. The current her has no value worth roping into the committee. The witch racked her brain and insisted that she knew a place that had plenty of resources. Meanwhile, inside Han Feng's room, it sounds like he's playing a guessing game with his new roommate. Between outcast girl's hands, there was some sort of black hole. As she pulls one item after another from the hole, Han Feng shears. He's been trying to describe an item he needs, but this girl just pulled out a mannequin. To explain what's happening, Outcast Girl revealed that she has a dimensional storage ability. She can open a black hole that can suck everything in the vicinity. While it's easy to suck items in, taking them out is not as easy. Her accuracy in finding items is very low. Han Feng is curious about the black hole's insides and how the ability works. Outcast Girl herself had never explored the interior before. Since she had no problem rummaging with her hands, Han Feng reckoned that he could take a look inside. So, he inserted his head into the girl's black hole. Don't call the cops. It's not how it sounds like. With half of his body inside the subspace, he opened his eyes to a vast dimension filled with endless supplies. The scale was unbelievably massive. Supplies and random bullshit floated around in chaos, as expected of the superhuman who emptied the supermarkets in the East region overnight. Suddenly, Han Feng started tearing up as he realized something. The space inside the black hole is devoid of oxygen. He forcefully pulled his head out of the gasless subspace and gobbled air like a madman. Just a few seconds inside that accursed subspace was traumatizing enough. He complained to Outcast Girl. She did not even warn him that there was no air inside. It felt like all the moisture in his body was nearly sucked dry. Not minding his complaints, she continued to rummage through her infinite stash, and finally found what they were looking for. As it turned out, Han Feng was looking for remote-controlled toys. Boxes of drones and RC cars poured out of the black hole. Han Feng was so hyped that he forgot about his near-death experience in an instant. On the cold, icy stairs of floor 18, some raiders try their luck to rob some poor souls again. By now this floor has garnered infamy with rumors of a monster roaming the halls. Glass's raider doesn't believe such supernatural rumors. Besides, Mr. Zhang personally sent them here to scout the floor. They cannot afford to let their boss down. Some of them are skeptical of the info they got from that girl, Lee Hyona. Still, workers must work and earn their keep. Unbeknownst to the raiders, they are being watched by Han Feng and his new toys. Fortunately, they managed to get the monitoring system in place just in time to anticipate the uninvited guests. They've devised a plan to deal with situations like this one. Han Feng will light the fire, and Plan 2 can commence. Setting a 2-minute timer on his stopwatch, he exited the room. On the stairs, the raiders stopped in their tracks upon hearing a faint and creepy sound up ahead. What followed the sound was a cacophony of lights. The source of those lights was none other than the remote-controlled cars Han Feng had set in advance. The raiders calmed down upon seeing the toys. What they did not see were the explosives strapped on those toys. When the fuse burned out, small explosions filled the stairs, swallowing the raiders. Don't worry, it's not lethal. It was just some lime explosives to blind the intruders. While incapacitated, a drone flew over their heads. On the drone's tail, they saw yet another explosive that made the raiders scatter and retreat to where they had come from. They tried to outrun the flying drone, but Outcast Girl is an adept pilot. Han Feng insisted that they must really teach these bastards a lesson this time around. But in his desire to toy with the raiders, the drone got way too low and too close to one of them, leaving it vulnerable to an attack. In a desperate attempt to get out of Glass Raider's swings, one of the drone's propellers got clipped by the crowbar. With the loss of control on the drone's left side, stabilization became impossible. They can't afford to lose this one, as it's their only aerial toy. Outcast Girl tried to regain control, but the spiraling flying toy had flown out of the window. The timer Han Feng had set finally hit 0, and the firework attached to their only drone exploded like it was an Arctic New Year celebration outside. This explosion caused the right propeller to malfunction, and they finally lost all control. Outcast Girl tried to salvage the situation by making a touch emergency landing outside the window of a certain floor. Han Feng suited up, preparing to go out and get their toy. That drone is way too important to them right now. But their aerial camera caught something odd. Between the stairs lies what looks like a corpse. Upon zooming in, it became clear that the alleged corpse looked an awful lot like Brother Lee. Han Feng wonders what the gangster is doing out on the cold stairs. Maybe he was robbed too. Right now, there are 2 reasons to go out there. Han Feng warned his roommate not to open the door for anyone. He packed some light essentials in case anything happened. Outcast Girl also handed him a radio to maintain communication. As a final touch, Han Feng grabbed his pistol, loaded it up, and hoped that he wouldn't need to use it outside. Flashlight in hand, Han Feng cautiously descended the staircase. The 17th, 16th, and 15th floors were safe now that the scouting raiders had retreated. Based on the measurements from the drone, the temperature outside is already at negative 49.8 Celsius. Without any protective measures, humans will freeze to death within minutes, if not seconds. Brother Lee is in a very precarious situation, and Han Feng needs to be quick if he wants to rescue his bro. Meanwhile, the scouting team relayed what happened to them on the upper floors. Mr. Zhang calmly listened and thanked them for their efforts. For their troubles, all they got was 3 pieces of thick clothes and a pack of noodles each. Given how scarce resources have become, these noodle packs have become priceless, rewarded only for those who contribute to the cause. Looking raggedy as fuck, Lee Hyona asked Mr. Zhang if she could finally join their group now. He coldly rejected her again. Right now, they can't even confirm if this attack was Han Feng's doing. Moreover, if not for Uncle Liu personally witnessing someone moving resources before the disaster, Mr. Zhang wouldn't even entertain her words. For now, they need to gather up and check the floor with superior numbers. Whether Lee Hyona's information is real or false will be confirmed in this next operation. This is her chance to demonstrate her worth. Taking a steel pipe and gripping the weapon with both hands, she's determined to do whatever it takes to get in. Before going up, Mr. Zhang reiterated that everyone is important manpower for the collective and must mind their safety. With the big boss at the forefront, a sizable raiding group assembled and took to the stairs. Halfway through their climb, they spotted the unconscious and freezing Brother Lee. Taking a hot water canister, Mr. Zhang made Li Zi drink and woke up with his tongue burning. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at the raiding force surrounding him with contempt. He clicked his tongue, feeling unlucky that these bastards were the ones that rescued him. Mr. Zhang's lapdog jumped into action and demanded that he thank Mr. Zhang for saving his life. Brother Lee just sarcastically laughed at that. The gangster still refuses to bend to the collective's will, calling them out for pretending to be heroes when they're just thieves. The lapdog tried to curse and beat him up, but Mr. Zhang held him back. Once more, the always smiling big boss extended another invitation to Li Zi to join forces with them. And just like before, he harshly rejected the offer. The raiders were getting annoyed at his stubbornness and shamelessness after being rescued. Brother Li does not like being forced to do as he's told. Before he could turn around and climb up the stairs, Mr. Jiang firmly grabbed him by the shoulders. The shady bastard smiled broadly and asked if there was some kind of misunderstanding here. He insisted that they just wanted to bolster their strength to give those weaker a higher chance of survival. But Brother Li can see through Bastard Jiang's phony smile. The committee, which is supposedly committed to protecting the weak, had been rationing only one meal every 3 days for the elderly. That's practically a death sentence in this situation. Moreover, Brother Li has no other relatives nearby, so guilt-tripping him into joining won't work at all. On the stairs leading to the next floor, Han Feng is silently observing and listening to their conversation. What he heard just now confirms that Jiang Xueyu doesn't really care about everyone. It also makes sense why they want to rope in younger people while letting the old, weak, sick, and disabled people slowly rot away. If this goes on, the committee will eventually erupt in conflicts. Done with Brother Li's rudeness, the lapdog jumped in to bark on the gangster's face for not appreciating the kindness they were extending. Lapdog made the mistake of entering Brother Li's attack range. Without batting an eye, the gangster with a heart of gold headbutted the lapdog as hard as he could. After that headbutt, Brother Li's whole body trembled in pain, but he continued to stand on business. Just one stare from the man with nothing to lose made the armed raiders subconsciously step back. While his men wordlessly looked at him in anticipation of the next order, Mr. Jiang contemplated. Slowly, the armed raiders got over their fear and slowly started closing in on Li. While trembling and swaying, struggling to even stay upright, he challenged these thieving bastards to come at him. Still monitoring the situation from one floor above, Han Feng noticed that his bro was about to fall at any moment, and he needed help. As much as he wants to, there are way too many raiders down there. If he intervenes, he might fall victim to their numbers. But Brother Li had helped him out so many times before. Han Feng can't just watch his benefactor throw his life away in a miserable last stand. Suddenly, an idea struck the young man's mind. He pulled out his pistol and aimed downwards. He calmly watched the commotion unravel with a blicky in his hand and a finger in the trigger. No one has even swung at him, and Brother Li's already swaying like he's about to collapse again. Han Feng finally had enough of the raiders ganging up on his boy and fired a warning shot. The bullet nearly hit Mr. Jiang's lapdog in his crotch, freaking everybody out. Hearing the sound of a gunshot cut through their confidence, they could not believe that someone had a firearm in the building. Han Feng slowly descended the stairs while his gun was raised, demanding that nobody move. It was quite effective in getting the raiders off their backs. Nervously looking around, Brother Li saw the familiar gun and immediately identified his little bro. While the robbing raiders were shitting their pants, Mr. Jiang remained unnaturally composed. In the crowd, Li Hyona's eyes widened at the sight of the gun-toting Han Feng. He carefully handed Brother Li his house key, and they slowly retreated while keeping an eye on the intruders. The underlings looked at their big boss for their next move. Some of them wanted to attack the two while they were fumbling around. That thought was quickly dashed away when Han Feng fired yet another warning shot. He had already warned them not to move, and they were still trying his patience. He then ordered them to throw their weapons away and kneel. Slowly, the raiders followed the order while maintaining their fearful vigilance. This should buy Han Feng and his bro enough time to go back to the room safely. After a few seconds of kneeling in silence, and as the duo's footsteps got farther, Mr. Jiang was the first one to stand up and ask if anyone knew who the gunman was. Li Hyona took this opportunity to snitch that it was Han Feng, the owner of the place they were aiming for in the first place. Jiang's lapdog directed his anger towards the witch for not warning them that they were targeting an armed man. Mr. Jiang, de-escalated the situation, believing that Hyona had no reason to lie. He also laid down what this means to his men. If that Han Feng guy even has such a weapon, isn't it only fair to assume that he also has supplies? The thought of stealing more supplies lit a fire under the brainwashed crowd's asses. Mr. Jiang is pretty much convinced that the deliveries Uncle Liu saw before the catastrophe are the real deal. While they have renewed hope of securing more supplies, it might be tough to proceed with their original plan, given that any one of them could get shot. But Mr. Jiang believes that Han Feng is a wuss incapable of murder, or he would have capped a few of them by now. Furthermore, no one can hide in their house forever and not come out, right? Still, the big boss gave his men the rundown for a change of plans. For now, they will return and prepare some safety measures before coming back. They must take down room 1804 as soon as possible. Speaking of room 1804, the duo had finally arrived outside the room. Until now, Brother Li's hands are still trembling, making it hard to unlock the door, while Han Feng keeps his eyes peeled and fingers ready for any retaliation. As soon as Brother Li successfully unlocked the door, he felt pleasant, warm air wafting from inside, a sensation he had been craving for. When they got in, Brother Li was surprised to see a fully functional radiator and a running generator. Behind one of the glass doors was a sea of supplies that would make anyone's mouth water. Brother Li turned to his little bro and curiously asked what was the deal with this heavenly house. While the gangster was reveling at the luxurious setup, Outcast Girl popped out of her room to ask if Han Feng retrieved the drone. He was so caught up in rescuing his bro that he forgot what he came down there for in the first place. 2 hours and several hefty meals later, Brother Lee has finally been caught up with a portion of the true story. Han Feng simply told the gullible gangster that he had predicted the disaster and had prepared as much as possible. The young man also apologized to his bro for not looping him in. He was just worried about the information about his supplies being leaked, so he limited the number of people who knew. After finishing his meal, Brother Lee stood up and bowed with utmost gratitude. If not for his little bro, he would have starved and frozen to death. The fact that he can enjoy a warm meal again is already an extreme kindness. When the gangster lifted his head, tears of appreciation were streaming down his face. Han Feng insisted that he was just returning the favor for all the help Brother Lee had given him. Feeling moved to the core, Brother Lee praised Han Feng for being such a good guy and brother. Now that he's here, Lee also shared the overall situation in the building complex as of now. Things have become very different now. The last time he updated Han Feng about current events was before the power supply was cut off. Since that day, that Zhang bastard has been going around stealing supplies from everyone in the name of collectivism. He amassed a lot of followers but also made some formidable enemies who disapproved of his methods. Some people could not live off the minuscule rations and left the group, but the big boss seemed not too concerned about the dwindling of their numbers. He might look unbothered, but behind everyone's back, he regularly sends Jin Qinwu, his lapdog, to take care of deserters under the guise of reducing the threat against the collective. Han Feng was surprised. Jin Qinwu and Jin Qinwen used to be a sweet, smart, and caring pair of twins. Basically, this collective committee expanded its influence and size quickly through underhanded tricks. But Brother Lee firmly believes in the saying that evil has its retribution. Zhang and his goons made their biggest mistake when they tried to rob a man named Li Zhenghao. You see, that guy was a boxer who was once the country's middleweight champion. If that was the case, it is natural that the twerps in the committee got beaten up badly, but that Zhang bastards refused to admit defeat, lose face, and lose the respect of his cult. Under his direct orders, raiders kept going to Li Zhenghao to fight. Of course, all of them got pummeled to a bloody pulp. Because of this incident, the boxer amassed a following of his own. Among them, there are two standouts who are starting to make a name for themselves. One is Zheng Yangyu, a boxing fan. He used to participate in underground boxing matches for a few years. He is notorious for his speed. The other is called Jin Zhongzai, another diehard fan of Zheng Hao. He is blessed with overwhelming strength, and he is built like a monster. With these two on the boxer's corner, the birth of a new faction in the neighborhood was imminent. And they hate the hypocrisy of Zhang Shuiyu with passion. Brother Lee added that bastard Jiang was desperate to resolve this conflict and finally decided to target Han Feng's supplies. He tried to warn his little bro, but he passed out on the stairs. This is good, as it means that Mr. Jiang's empire is slowly crumbling from the inside. While the trio were discussing their next move, skittering noises could be heard from outside. Outcast Girl pulled out the live camera feed outside the door and saw the raiders gathering right outside. Han Feng stood up to set up his electric door handle trap. Outcast Girl stopped him from rushing and warned him about the smell of sulfur coming from the hallway. Without warning, the whole room shook. Something just exploded outside. Mr. Zhang and the raiders are actually crazy enough to use bombs. By the sound of it, they should be using localized demolition explosives, and they shouldn't be too powerful. Looking at the live feed, it finally makes sense why they're lugging heavy riot shields. It's also apparent that Li Hyona was the one who tipped off these bastards. While the raiders set up their next load, Han Feng hurriedly plugged in his electric trap. A second later, an anguished scream can be heard outside. It looks like the trap worked, and it took down some poor schmuck. The raiders stepped back in fear, but Mr. Zhang ordered them to continue placing explosives. This time, they need to target the borders of the door and double the packets. Blindly following his orders, the raiders armed the walls and blew it up once more. The boom cracked the walls but failed to blow open the entrance. Mr. Zhang is certain that their explosives are not the problem. The doors are just equipped with ample defensive measures. Refusing to give up, Mr. Zhang upped the packets to 3 this time around. If nothing happens, then they'll just continue increasing the load. He is determined to take this house down today. Inside, Han Feng and Brother Lee barricaded the entrance as best as they could. The third explosion shook the barricade out of place and nearly shattered their eardrums. After that loud-ass explosion, an odd cracking sound can be heard. It seems like the demolition explosives are doing their job and weakening the walls. If this goes on, the cracks will only get bigger and bigger until they give in. Blocking and barricading the entrance is useless, but Han Feng has another idea he wants to try out. They just need to remove the random stuff they lifted and crammed in the entrance. Outcast Girl stepped in to help. Brother Lee was skeptical that the little doll could help much until she raised her hands and produced her black hole. Brother Lee stepped back in shock and confusion. When she started sucking in the heavy stuff barricading the entrance, Brother Lee nearly passed out at the incredulous sight. The work that should have taken them minutes was done in just a second. Brother Lee felt a newfound fear for the little girl and her ability. Without any time to explain, Han Feng activated his purple light, coated his hands, and ran for the walls. He spread the purple light all over its surface, softening it like last time to see if he could reshape the cracks on the spot. He has to stay focused and in control, or the hardening process would take a long time. After making sure that all the cracks were accounted for, he activated the green light for the next part. Thankfully, his idea worked. Combining purple and green lights can repair and strengthen the targeted area. Brother Lee just saw his 2 new roommates perform tricks outside the realm of possibility. He is tweaking right now. Outcast Girl popped out and nonchalantly warned them to get down. Just in time for the 3rd explosion, the trio squatted down and covered their ears. Han Feng had just finished strengthening his walls, but new cracks were quickly forming again. This time, the raiders have switched their focus and are now bombing the floor. If that's the case, then it will be useless no matter how much Han Feng repairs the affected area. He had to devise yet another plan. But what he came up with might be a bit dangerous and require absolute trust between the 3 of them. Outcast Girl is down with whatever, and Brother Lee is a real ride or die no matter what the move is. All they have to do is proceed according to what Han Feng says down to the letter. After a few more rounds of bombing, the door to room 1804 finally gave in. Those demolition explosives finally did their job and blew the entrance wide open. The raiders remained vigilant as they slowly crept inside with their shields up. They are set on clearing up all the supplies they can find. Mr. Jiang also warned his men of any possible angles for ambush. They swarmed Han Feng's house, sweeping the kitchen and the living room for supplies, and mysteriously, they came up empty. All they could find was some rubbish and a box of seeds in the kitchen. Seeing as they wasted so many explosives for trash and seeds, the raiders turned to Lee Hyona for answers. She insisted that she did not lie and directed the raiders to the bedroom. As soon as they tried opening the door to the last unchecked room, Brother Lee came out, kicking the shield into the raiders' faces. Behind him was Han Feng, who had his pistol in his hand. He raised the gun and pointed it at Mr. Jiang. Without hesitation, Han Feng pulled the trigger, but the bullet was stopped by the heavy-duty shield. Han Feng warned the fools to get out, or he won't be so polite anymore. Behind the shields, Mr. Jiang confronted him about hiding supplies and neglecting the needs of the collective, making so many residents suffer and starve. He asserted that they came here to demand justice for such a grave offense. The bastard was shameless enough to tell Han Feng to cough up his resources to clear his conscience, spouting some bullshit about working together to triumph over the apocalypse. Han Feng cannot stand this man's unreasonably righteous, awe-inspiring but ultimately insane words when all they're doing is moral kidnapping. But his men have completely bought into the insanity. They are hanging on to their leader's words while looking like a pack of starving wolves looking to vent. Instead of despairing, Han Feng sees this as a chance to manipulate the narrative. Putting on his award-winning offended face, he asked them what and where the supplies they were yapping about. Lee Hyona interjected, insisting that they must have hidden everything somewhere. She reiterated that she saw the light and even felt heat coming inside the last time she was there. Tired of her annoying ass voice, Han Feng fired another shot that made the witch buckle in fear. Unfortunately, the shield protected her from a clean headshot. Han Feng called her shameless for spouting lies. He added that if this witch had not scammed him into exchanging his food and necessities for useless seeds, he would not have been in such a poor state today. Slowly but surely, the raiders started turning on Hyona. Unfortunately, Mr. Jiang was level-headed enough to stop the internal strife from developing and proposed a simple method to see who was lying. All they have to do is go into the bedroom to check if Han Feng's home is really empty. Han Feng acted tough, but he permitted them to do a thorough check, his finger still on the trigger. After a few minutes of tossing the bedroom, all the raiders found there was some more rubbish and a little girl inside. Outcast Girl then played her part. Calling Han Feng her brother, she hugged him and cried that she was hungry and afraid. Now the raiders are pissed that they worked so hard to break the door for half a day just to get nothing. Evidently incensed, Mr. Jiang demanded an explanation from the witch. Now that things have developed this way, and they've wasted so much time and resources on this raid, she must give a plausible explanation, or the raiders would gladly tear her apart. Slowly losing her mind, all she could do was insist that she was not a liar. While that may be true, no one's buying her words anymore. The only logical explanation she can think of is that Han Feng is playing tricks on everyone. As always, she blamed Han Feng for putting her in a tough spot. Lee Hyona finally snapped and ran out of the shield's cover, charging at Han Feng. He was blinded by her flashlight and got his gun taken away. In a careless twist of fate, the witch managed to grab the pistol. She aimed it at Han Feng's chest and demanded to know where the supplies were hidden. The raiders looked at her like she was utterly insane while she threatened to shoot Han Feng. Egging her on to shoot, the young man continued to insist that she already scammed all his resources long ago. Just as when she was about to pull the trigger, the raiders surprisingly stepped in and knocked the gun out of her hand before she could harm anyone. Mr. Jiang's lapdogs restrained the insane witch while she continuously claimed that she was not a liar. Before Han Feng could grab hold of his gun, Mr. Jiang's hand extended and picked up the blicky. He slowly raised the pistol while staring Han Feng directly in the eyes. His lapdogs continued berating the witch for leading them on a wild goose chase. Before they could start beating her up with metal pipes, Mr. Jiang intervened and stopped any more unnecessary bloodshed. Seeing as their plan failed, he's in damage control mode now. He hypocritically reminded his men that the committee was not a violent group, and Han Feng's house was not an execution ground. Scaring her with the gun, Mr. Jiang is willing to give her a chance to turn over a new leaf. He even apologized to Han Feng for causing distress, and for everything that happened today. Surprisingly, he willingly handed the gun back to its owner, and promised to give a proper explanation and apology soon. Han Feng cautiously took his weapon back, and the shameless Mr. Jiang extended an invitation for him to join the committee. He insisted that Han Feng should mull it over for a bit and get back to him with an answer. As he and his goons retreated, he urged Han Feng to answer at the supply collection spot tomorrow. And so, the trio were left in the mysteriously empty and depressing home by themselves. Han Feng's head hung low, concerned with Brother Li. With a sigh of relief, he lifted his head in reprieve now that this farce was finally over. With the performance done, they can finally go back to chilling with the comfort of electricity and warmth. Now that his place is compromised, they transferred over to Outcast Girl's surprisingly cozy and spacious house, right above Han Feng's. It's all thanks to her that they can put on such a convincing performance so quickly. You see, before the raiders got in, Han Feng coordinated the plan flawlessly. First, they stored all valuables and resources inside Outcast Girl's subspace. They made sure to leave some rubbish and wrappers in random places to really sell the performance. They even opened the windows to quickly lower the temperature inside. They had to make it seem like they had run out of supplies a while ago. Those committee bastards can just waste their energy tearing down a door holding nothing inside. While sharing a lavish meal, the trio celebrated the fact that Zhang Shuiyu's failed mission, which yielded nothing, would surely stir up anger within the group. In that situation, those greedy raiders will start pointing fingers at the weak links. Since Han Feng has a gun, the unarmed and hateful Li Hyona will definitely get the worst of it. The plan worked wonderfully, but it did not go down without a hitch. Han Feng's gun was even taken. But the young man had already accounted for that as the worst-case scenario. He was mostly certain that when Zhang Shuiyu gets his hands on the gun, he will most likely opt to resolve the situation peacefully to maintain his righteous image. If it did not go down that way, and the madman decided to pull the trigger instead, Han Feng had already emptied the mag with the 2 shots he fired. That way, letting the raiders take the gun on purpose only enhanced the reality of the performance. Brother Li finally relaxed. He thinks that from now on, they just need to pretend to be suffering while secretly enjoying a luxurious life. But Han Feng corrected him. Their main mission from now on is to bring the committee down. Back in the car park, the distribution of poultry supplies continued. Even though they're getting less and less food, the people's gratitude for Mr. Jiang is still there. While everyone is busy with the distribution, 2 sneaky figures are moving in the background. They quickly entered the off-limits area, where only a few were permitted entry. The committee members in charge of securing the supplies are just getting back to the car park. Those 2 sneaky figures, Han Feng and Brother Li, tried their best to blend into the background to remain undetected. Surprisingly, it worked. According to Brother Li's prior investigations, the first 4 floors of the building have been cleared out. The 5th and 6th floors house the logistics workers and their family members. Mr. Jiang and his inner circle reside on the 9th to 12th floor, and the warehouse is likely to be on the 7th and 8th floors. There will be guards posted up from the 5th floor onwards. The duo has to be sneaky, avoid firing the gun, and get by with metal rods as much as possible. As the 2 ascended to the higher floors, there was an odd absence of security. Without even needing to use their weapons, the 2 reached the 7th floor without a fuss. Brother Li is starting to doubt if they're on the right path at all. While it's understandable that the committee is understaffed, having no guards at all is a bit much. Splitting up, Han Feng and Brother Li decided to search the entire floor for the warehouse. Han Feng was expecting some action, but was pleasantly surprised with how smoothly they infiltrated this far. Since the committee still boasts superior numbers, the trio has to work smart and start from the inside to bring the whole thing down. As far as Han Feng can see, that thieving organization is only held together by the promise of supplies. If they can find that stash, Outcast Girl, or the Evil King as she likes to be called, they can go in and empty their coffers. Still, finding the exact room where they hide the supplies within an entire floor will take quite a bit of time, and they must watch their steps along the way. Eventually, Han Feng heard Brother Li giving him the signal. When he saw what Brother Li was clamoring about, Han Feng was flabbergasted. One of the rooms had the word warehouse blatantly stuck to it. This was such an obvious trap. Even the key was left in the keyhole. But if Brother Li was alone, he would have fallen for it already. Look, this dumbass blondie might be a good homie, but he is not the sharpest tool in the shed. There are thin wires wrapped around the key and handle, indicative of the simplest trap there is. If these raiders can afford to bomb Han Feng's door, who knows what kind of trap they have set up. Han Feng had to direct Brother Li not to touch anything and all willy-nilly. For now, they just need to scout and know the key locations for their attack. While the duo was quietly discussing their plan to continue searching the higher floors, the door next to them creaked open. 2 guards came out just as the dumbass duo were discussing their plan to clear the supplies out. They all stared at each other, taking a second to process what the hell was happening. Han Feng regained composure and bolted out as fast as he could with Brother Li in tow. They eventually reached the stairs, but the guards quickly caught up. Han Feng had to step in, save his bro from a nasty concussion, and block a metal rod strike with one of his own. Retaliating, Brother Lee landed a painful kick on the guard's groin. That bought them enough time to get back to the staircase and lock the door behind. Unfortunately, the commotion attracted other guards coming from the lower floors. With no other choice, they have to hurry and proceed upwards with hopes of not encountering any more enemies. When they reached the 8th floor, Brother Lee noticed Han Feng clutching his right arm. It was probably fractured from blocking that strike earlier. For now, they must find a place to hide, and quickly. Just as they were about to look for a hiding spot, Brother Lee saw something that made him stop in his tracks. Before he could warn Han Feng of the figure looming behind, the young man was snatched away into a dark room as if he were weighing nothing. As soon as Han Feng was dragged into a dark and isolated room, the door shut close. When he opened his eyes, the sight of a tall, hooded man towering over him freaked him the hell out while Brother Lee bangs on the locked door. The hooded man sternly asked what they were doing on these floors. Trying to salvage the situation, Han Feng lied and answered that they had just come to collect supplies. But his BS did not work. The man stomped on his arm, making Han Feng scream in anguish. Under the hood was an old man with gray hair and an unkempt beard. He urged Han Feng to stop lying as he was not buying it. He saw the duo deliberately avoid the 5th and 6th floors, clearly doing something shady against the committee. When asked if he was tailing them, the old man simply asked Han Feng why he thinks there are no guards around the higher floors. In the corner of the room, the guards who were supposed to watch and roam around the warehouse were unconscious and stacked on top of one another. Before they could talk a little more in depth, the sound of more committee guards flooding into the floor sounded outside. That must mean Brother Lee has been caught. The old man clicked his tongue in annoyance and slowly walked over to the nearest window. He turned the freezing handle, letting the cold, frigid air into the dark room. Han Feng asked the old man what he was doing opening the 8th floor window. He argued that the height is just equivalent to 4 stories. The piled-up snow has already reached between the 3rd and 4th floors. With all that snow cushion, jumping from such height should not be that big of a deal. With the battalion of raiders hot on their heels, they can either jump down or wait to get beaten to death. Speaking of the raiders, they're already working on busting the locked door open. Han Feng is starting to consider the old man's words. The mad lad had already jumped down without hesitation. As soon as the door busted open, Han Feng chose to risk it all and follow in the old man's footsteps. As scary as it was, he jumped from the 8th floor, hoping that the snow would be enough to soften his fall. For added insurance, Han Feng positioned himself to fall hand first so he could use the purple light to cushion his landing spot. While he lands, the old man digs himself out of the snow, completely fine and intact. Han Feng might have landed awkwardly, but he's alive, albeit a little winded. The raiders up in the window looked at the two like they were absolutely insane. Moving quickly, the old man ran for the nearest window and elbowed the brittle glass open. Even Han Feng was impressed with the old man's relentless survival skills. He followed him into the room, successfully escaping the clutches of angry committee raiders. Mr. Jiang's men did not have the balls to jump and make chase. They had to take the stairs like normies. Eventually, the old man led Han Feng to one of the rooms and lit a fire for a little bit of warmth. Han Feng admitted that he would have been caught if it hadn't been for this bearded old man. He practically dragged him back up to the 5th floor instead of settling for the 3rd. Those goons chasing them would naturally think they'd hide out in the lower levels and are now swarming the place and placing traps. Seeing the uneasy look on the young man's face, Beardy asked if he was scared, which was only natural considering they were chilling on a bonfire next to a dead man. When asked why he saved Han Feng, the old man corrected him immediately. Given the chance, he'd like to off Han Feng himself. He then praised the young man for at least having enough brain cells to not fall for the lame trap in that fake warehouse. For now, he wants Han Feng to spill the beans on anything he knows about the committee. If he clams up or lies, Beardy would gladly beat the truth out of him. Considering that he had taken all those guards down, Han Feng reckoned that the old man was lurking on the higher floors, either to steal supplies or to settle some enmity against the committee. Either way, Han Feng and Brother Lee's appearance must have disrupted his plans. When asked if he has some sort of vendetta against Mr. Jiang and his goons, the old man admitted that he did. He's also aware of a secret that Jiang Shuiyu is hiding. Han Feng perked up and asked what sort of secret that was. The old man stood up, confirming that this kid must be connected to Jiang Shuiyu somehow. Prodding further, Beardy demanded that Han Feng spit out everything he knew about the committee unless he wanted to be the second corpse in this room. The choice is solely up to him. Afraid of being beaten to death, Han Feng started trauma dumping about his unpleasant encounters with that Eisen-looking bastard. To summarize, Jiang blew up his house, stole his girl, and ransacked his supplies. He even pulled out all the stops and threatened them with a gun for the sake of revenge. But a paltry pistol wouldn't cut it. Han Feng mixed in a little bit of truth with a few lies and threw in the pistol bit, hoping that the old man would buy his story. It looks like Beardy did. He sighed and confirmed that a junky pistol is nothing for those big shots in the committee to worry about. The fact that Jiang set Han Feng free without taking the gun proves that. When asked why, the old man presented two theories. First, the bastard is just putting on a show to maintain his position as the righteous leader. The second and the more terrifying theory is that he has an arsenal of even more powerful weapons stashed away. Han Feng added that he brought his brother with him to finish Jiang Shuiyu off. hoping that the committee would slowly die without the head of the snake. While the original intention of the committee was good, they managed to help some people survive. Jiang Shuiyu's increasingly pragmatic philosophy got everyone thinking that doing bad is the only way to live comfortably. Even if the apocalypse subsides, the people who've lost their conscience and fallen to depravity won't ever fit back into society. That's precisely why they must put a stop to the corrupt committee. The old man is on board, but he's worried about what would happen if they do succeed. In this world, the strong have always preyed on the weak. Killing Jiang Shuiyu would only plunge the whole neighborhood into lawless plunder and slaughter for the little resources available. If that's the case, they might as well ask for a third opinion. It just so happens that another person has been listening in on their conversation from the other side of the door. Whoever it was, they tried to throw a water canister at the old man's face and missed. Upon retaliating, Beardy was surprised that his fist was stopped by such a small body. He then noticed that the hands holding his fist back were trembling in fear. Beardy repositioned and motioned to bash the Snoop's head, but stopped as soon as he heard her familiar voice. With pink hair and an adorable coat, it was none other than the charming Nurse Jin. Seeing the man inside the room, she recognized him as Mr. Han from the hospital. When things calmed down, Nurse Jin treated Han Feng's fractured arm while she profusely apologized for eavesdropping on their private conversation. She just came by after receiving Grandpa Lee's supplies and for the re-examination. She came in and discovered the poor old man dead, and then she heard the door open. She got frightened and subconsciously hid in the other room. Beardy suspects that the little nurse must have been involved in the old man's death. He sees her selfless dedication as nothing but a joke. While he might be right in some respects, Nurse Jin does not regret her actions. People can say she's cruel or heartless, but only by surviving can she save more people in dire need. Furthermore, Jiang Shuiyu gave her a pass so she could freely walk anywhere she needed. She also benefits from the committee's supplies even if she doesn't directly work for them. But Mr. Jiang has been chasing out a lot of sick and old people recently. Grandpa Lee is one of them. It makes sense. With one less mouth to feed, the committee can hold on to their authority for longer. However, according to Brother Lee, a new faction has been rising in the neighborhood. With those boxers at odds with the committee, Jiang Shuiyu must be eager to eliminate the competition. That must be why he's ramping up the abandonment of the old and sick. He wants to keep the young and healthy, fed and happy. With increasingly desperate measures, there's a good chance that a faction war will erupt sooner rather than later. If that's the case, it would be wise to try and find Jiang's alleged weapon arsenal. Beardy asked the young man what he could even do by himself if he did find the stash. Han Feng asserted that he'll figure something out when he gets there, but he refuses to sit around and die with everyone else. Beardy thinks they're fucked either way, so he won't stop Han Feng from digging his own grave. He then warned the young'uns that Jiang Shuiyu and the committee were just small fish in a big pond. There will be more bloodshed and slaughter for survival down the road. In a dog-eat-dog world, the one that survives till the end wins. With that being said, Beardy opened the window and made his exit. This dude is actually allergic to using doors normally. With only Han Feng and Nurse Jin left in the room, the nurse with super strength eagerly asked if there was anything she could do to help. Han Feng politely declined her offer to help, as he did not want to drag another person down with him. But Nurse Jin is persistent. She heard the whole story, and she can't just stand by while the neighborhood is in danger. She even got furious at that Jiang bastard for everything he did to Han Feng. Seeing the determined and genuine look in her eyes, Han Feng could not reject her. Now that she's on board, there is actually something that Han Feng needs help with. Back in the car park, the guards were reporting their encounter with Han Feng and the old man. Speaking of the devil, the man who they thought would hide like a rat appeared before everyone out in the open. Outing himself in the open got him dragged into the lion's den. In an isolated room away from everyone else, Han Feng got beaten until he was coughing and throwing up. Mr. Jiang's lapdog tied him up, kicked him repeatedly, and warned him of the dangers of stealing supplies from the committee. The brainwashed twin threatened to cripple his other arm if he ever dared to step foot in their territory again. He would have wailed at Han Feng even more if Mr. Jiang hadn't needed all hands on deck to deal with some sort of emergency that had just cropped up. After making sure that the goons had left, Han Feng's body emanated a green light, healing his injuries. He paid the price in the form of bruises and wounds, but he finally made his way back to the committee's area. Han Feng intends to look for the armory once he finishes healing his injuries. He can't afford to waste any more time. Every second counts. After bathing his body with the green light, he softened the rope using his purple light. He even fixed his fractured arm, but using the green light drains way too much energy that he almost fainted in the middle of doing so. He really needs to figure out how to heal specific parts instead of blindly coating his whole body. Right after recovering and freeing himself, Han Feng heard footsteps coming from outside. The door creaked open, and the goons tossed the tied-up Brother Lee in. Fortunately, Han Feng moved fast enough to wrap the rope back onto his body. Seemingly in a hurry, the goons exited soon after, giving Han Feng a chance to check on his bro. Brother Lee's face was unrecognizable. Look, he's not the best-looking guy in his normal state, but his bruised-up mug is even worse. Han Feng added even more injury by slapping Brother Lee awake. At least it was an effective way to wake him up. Brother Lee just wished that little bro slapped the less swollen side. Now he can't even feel anything on the left side of his face. He then recounted how he was dragged through a different room. Before he got caught, he managed to get into the power distribution room and hid inside. In there, he found a big out-of-place hole connected downwards to an unnaturally deep location. Thinking that they would eventually check on the power distribution room, Brother Lee risked it for the biscuit, grabbed the wires, and climbed down to the unknown. He initially thought he would come out of the basement car park 1, but the line extended all the way to basement 2. Oddly enough, there wasn't even a single person in there. All he saw was a lot of boxes neatly arranged, lying on the ground. All of them were sealed tightly. Curiosity got the best of him, and he opened up a few boxes. Imagine his surprise when he saw the boxes were filled with sausages, each one as thick as his arm. He was about to investigate and take a closer look when he heard something or someone come up behind him. The next thing he remembers is Han Feng's wake-up slap. Now it makes sense why the committee and that Jiang bastard are so arrogant. They actually have heaps of supplies down on the lower floors. Han Feng skeptically asked if the contents of those boxes were really just sausages. If they have so much food, why would they work so hard, going as far as to use explosives to try and steal supplies? The boxes had nothing written on them. The contents were just shaped like sausages, so Brother Lee assumed they were. Nevertheless, something does not feel right. At least now they know that Zhang Xueyu really has a secret warehouse. Suddenly, the duo heard the guards coming back. They were talking about how odd it was that Mr. Zhang was rushing them to dispose of Li Ziyi when they were trying to rope him in just the day before. Hearing that he has a kill order out there scared Brother Lee out of his wits. When the goons entered the room with weapons in hand, the prisoners were gone. Confused, they searched the room. Unbeknownst to the poor goons, the duo had already set up a vengeful ambush. And so, they turned the tables, jumped their captors, knocked them out, and tied them up. Since Zhang Xueyu is going as far as to issue a kill order with his secret stash discovered, whatever's down there is definitely worth investigating. Still, there are tens of boxes in there. Brother Lee wonders what they can even do once they manage to get back into the second basement. Han Feng assured him that it wouldn't be a problem once they got together with the evil king. Retrieving and reactivating his earpiece, Han Feng contacted the evil king and asked if the big sister he had sent had arrived. Oddly enough, the little girl asked if it would really be okay to let the girl who snatched Han Feng's gun inside the house. This is bad. Instead of Nurse Jin knocking on the door, it is that witch, Li Hyona. Han Feng hurriedly warned the evil king to keep the door shut and avoid the crazy witch at all costs. But it might just be too late. The transmission was cut, and Han Feng is in the dark about what's happening upstairs. They have to go back up and check on the evil king's status first. For the second time today, the duo sneakily traversed the frigid halls of the lower floors, making sure that they didn't get caught once more. While they were mindful of not making any noticeable noise, loud crashes could be heard from up ahead. The survivors reliant on the committee are evacuating to the higher floors. The injured, elderly, and women, or at least what's left of them, must proceed up the stairs, while the able-bodied are ordered to bring their weapons and gather in the basement. It was pandemonium. They are panicking and trying their hardest to prevent the enemies from coming up and reaching their supply stash. The only logical explanation for the chaos Han Feng can think of is that the war with Li Jinghao's faction has finally started. Whatever the case may be, this hectic situation is beneficial for them. All they have to do is cover up, wear their masks, and try to blend into the crowd until they reach the evil king. The stairs were crowded with distressed survivors, and the duo fit right in. Unfortunately, their plan to stay low-key might not be feasible anymore. Mr. Zhang's lapdog coordinating the evacuation just fell on his ass. Li Zhenghao's number 1 and number 2 had intercepted the evacuees and were hungry for violence. Brother Li subconsciously pulled his little bro aside, protecting him from the shit show that was about to unfold. Meanwhile, on the upper floors, the evil king is observing Li Hyona through the door's peephole. The witch carefully moved and stuck her ear on the door's surface, trying her best to suss out if Han Feng was inside, but she couldn't hear anything. She looked highly suspicious in every sense of the word. It was at that moment that Nurse Jin finally pulled up with her med kit. When asked what she was doing snooping around Han Feng's door, Hyona was stun-locked as she tried her best to formulate an excuse. The best she could come up with was that she came over to search for food. Of course, Nurse Jin was not buying such flimsy bullshit. You see, Li Hyona was not alone. Behind her was a whole battalion of emaciated good-for-nothings equipped with weapons. Thanks for watching. If you want to find more of my new videos, subscribe to my other channels.